What works for GS may not work for your optional. Because every optional demands a different strategy, different depth, and a completely different answer writing approach. Some subjects need conceptual clarity. Some require deeper analytical preparation. That is why optional preparation cannot be generic. The VisionIAS Optional Classroom Program 2027 helps you prepare with structured syllabus coverage, subject-specific strategy, expert mentoring, answer writing practice, and an all-India test series with detailed feedback. The program will commence on 1st July for anthropology, geography, history, physics, political science and international relations, public administration, and sociology. Your optional is not the place for generic preparation. Train for it with the strategy it actually demands.
The biggest mistake in UPSC prep, thinking that more material equals more marks. You don't need more material, you need a system that works. At VisionIAS Delhi, our GS Foundation course is built to move you from confusion to clarity. Here's how. Right sequence. We teach subjects in an order that actually makes sense. So you don't just memorize, you understand. Integrated current affairs. No more separate notes. Use PT 365 and Mains 365 to link news directly to your syllabus. Early testing. Don't wait for the exam to find your gaps. We test and give one-on-one feedback from day one. Stop counting study hours and start counting your progress. Targeting UPSC 2027, build the foundation that toppers trust. Your preparation may look complete, but UPSC Prelims 2026 showed something important. Completion is not the same as readiness. The paper did not just test whether aspirant had read a topic, it tested whether they could think through it. Could they eliminate smartly? Could they connect static concepts with current issues? Could they stay calm when the question was not direct? Could they take decisions under pressure? That is where many aspirants struggle, not because they did not study, but because their preparation stayed in input mode, reading more, collecting more, revising passively. UPSC needs more than that. It needs a preparation system that turns knowledge into judgment. That is what the VisionIAS Delhi GS Foundation course is built for. Concepts are taught in a connected sequence. Current affairs is linked with static subjects. Tests help you identify gaps before the exam does. Answer writing builds structured thinking for mains. Mentorship helps correct your direction early. Build readiness from the beginning. VisionIAS Delhi GS Foundation course.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. So I see that some of you are students in foundation batch. The idea here is that I'll be telling you what is the approach that we need to have towards polity as a subject, and not just with respect to mains or prelims alone, but what is the integrated approach that we need to have for both the stages of the examination as far as polity is concerned. As you may have seen this year's prelims paper, of course, it was a very unconventional and possibly a bouncer in many ways, difficult paper, and therefore we expect that the cutoffs also are going to go down, and one can say that this was an anomaly year in many ways. But why am I mentioning that is because this year the weightage of polity as a subject in prelims was significantly less as compared to what we have seen in the past. We'll quickly have a look at the number of questions that UPSC has asked from polity in prelims in the past, and they have usually ranged between 15 to 20 on an average in a year. But this year, even if we include the questions that were asked with respect to ethics and some concepts such as accountability in polity, I don't think that the number of questions would cross anything more than 8 or 9. But that does not mean that polity as a subject loses its importance in the prelims or in the mains examination. In fact, if you look at the syllabus of GS paper 2 mains, then of course there are number of topics which have been mentioned in our syllabus related to polity, and also, as we are going to look at very shortly, many concepts in various other subjects are also deeply related to the concepts of polity. So we are going to be discussing that today. I'll be telling you what is the blueprint that you need to have for polity as a subject. We will take up one small topic and I'll try to tell you that what is the approach, especially for those of you who are not our students. You have an understanding of what is the way that you approach polity as a subject. Okay, so we've given the name of the session Preparing Polity the Right Way, but I also personally believe that there is no one single right way of preparing for any subject or for this exam. Everyone can have their own strategy, and that can be a right strategy as long as it works. So whatever I'm going to be sharing with you right now is just one of the strategies, and I expect that you people use the inputs from this particular session to build your own strategy, not just for polity but for the other subjects as well. Now, beginning with what is the importance of polity, and as far as mains exam, prelims exam, and in general, if we have to understand what are the things that are happening around us. This is one typical example that I always give to my students in the class when I'm talking about the concept of freedom of speech and expression in our constitution. As you all would know, Article 19(1)(a) of the Indian Constitution provides freedom of speech and expression to all the citizens of India. But this right is not an absolute right. This right can be restricted by the state on basis of certain grounds that have been mentioned in Article 19 itself. So there is a clause in Article 19, which is Article 19 Clause 2, that provides various grounds on the basis of which the state can make law and impose reasonable restrictions on a citizen's right to freedom of speech and expression. Now, right to freedom of speech and expression normally would mean that I have the right to express myself through oral words or through written words. If I'm writing an essay, if I'm writing an article, if I'm making a speech, that covers my right to freedom of speech and expression. But the Supreme Court of India, through its various judgments, has also said that right to freedom of speech and expression is very broad in nature, and it includes a number of other rights as well. For example, right to express oneself through making movies, or through writing songs, or writing stories, or writing books, or drama, or any kind of art form such as painting, also comes under Article 19(1)(a) of the Indian Constitution, which means that my right to make movies can also get the same protection that my speech has under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution. But having said that, Article 19(1)(a) of the Indian Constitution, as I just stated, is not absolute in nature and can be restricted by the state on the basis of the grounds that have been mentioned in Article 19(2). Now, the interesting thing is that there are numerous grounds that have been mentioned in Article 19(2), which includes public order, which includes decency or morality, which includes security of the state, sovereignty and integrity of India, friendly relation with foreign state, incitement to an offense, contempt of court, etc. So these are some of the grounds that have been mentioned in 19(2). But why am I showing you this particular picture? To explain the concept of Article 19(1)(a). And here what I'm trying to basically press the point on is that everything that we see around us in some or the other way is related to law, is related to the political system of the country. Now, Sholay is one movie which has gone into the annals of legends in India. It is considered to be one of the cult classic movies in India. And recently this movie had also completed its 50 years. Now, the interesting thing is, if you have seen the movie Sholay and if you have seen the ending which has been shown in the movie was not what was originally conceptualized by the makers of the movie. So as you people would recollect, in the end, towards the end of the movie, Thakur, who's played by Sanjeev Kumar, who's a former police officer and whose family had been killed by a dacoit, who was Gabbar Singh, he hires two hitmen to kill or to find Gabbar Singh, to get him to Thakur, and so that he can ensure that he takes revenge for the loss of his family members from Gabbar Singh. Now, the movie, the ending which has been shown, which has been published for the consumption of the people, is that Gabbar Singh is at the end of the day taken away by the police. So once all the fighting scenes etc. happen in the movie, and then after that, as usual as it would happen in all the 60s, 70s and 80s movie, the police would come once the entire incident would be over, and then they catch hold of Gabbar and they take him to jail. But this was not what was the original plot of the movie, or not the original ending of the movie. The original ending of the movie was that because Gabbar's hands had been chopped off by Thakur's hands had been chopped off by Gabbar Singh, therefore he wants to take the revenge for whatever has been done to his family members and to his life by Gabbar Singh. So the original ending of the movie was that Thakur, sorry, I'm confusing it again and again. So Thakur is wearing spike shoes and then he kills Gabbar with his spike shoes. But the time at which this particular movie was released was the time around emergency. And the government was trying to put number of restraints on freedom of speech and expression of the citizens. They also believed that there were a number of riots or number of protests that were going on across the country. People were also taking law into their hands. So the government did not want to set a wrong example by giving approval to a movie which would allow the protagonist of the movie to kill the villain and to take law into his own hands. So therefore, in the movie, when it was originally made, the ending was that Gabbar is supposed to be killed by Thakur. But then, when the movie had gone to Center Board of Film Certification, so as you people would know, in India, we have a law which is called as the Cinematograph Act. Now, the interesting and the peculiar thing about the name of the law is Cinematograph Act. Cinematograph Act in India provides powers to CBFC, that is the Center Board of Film Certification, to give ratings to movies. That's their job. And Center Board of Film Certification is also supposed to suggest if there are any scenes, if there are any songs, if there are any dialogues in the movie that cross the limit of decency or morality, or that may create certain difficulties with respect to public order, sovereignty and integrity of India, friendly relations with foreign state, they may even put certain cuts or censor those parts of the movie as well. Now, when Sholay had gone to Center Board of Film Certification, the Center Board of Film Certification did not give approval to it in its original form. The reason for that was because, as I said, the background was that there was emergency in the country and the government was already worried that people are taking law into their own hands. If we come out with a movie, if we allow a movie to be published where a person who was himself a police officer in the past takes revenge from someone who has done something wrong to him in the past without handing over that criminal to the police, then it would set a wrong example in the society. So on the grounds of what we know as mentioned as public order in Article 19 Clause 2, on the basis of which 19(1)(a) can be restricted, the Center Board of Film Certification suggested the cut to the movie and suggested the creators of the movie to go back and to change the ending of the movie, and that's why the ending of the movie is very different from what it was originally. Now, why am I telling you this? There was a question that was asked by UPSC several years back, almost 11 years back in the mains examination, which is that what do you understand by freedom of speech and expression? Does it include hate speech also? And then the next part of the question was that why is it that films in India stand on a different footing as compared to other forms of expression? Now, if you look at any kind of expression, let's say if I'm conducting the class here, I'm exercising my freedom of speech and expression, and while I'm doing so, I do not need to take permission from the government before I say certain things in the class. I don't need to run the script of the class, whatever I'm going to be discussing with you, through the government. Similarly, if I'm publishing a newspaper as well, or if I'm publishing a magazine, if I'm publishing a book, before I send the book for printing, I don't need to send it to the government for their approval or any such statutory body for their approval. All that I need to do is that I need to ensure that the book is well within the confinements of constitution and the law in India. And if in any case the book or my speech or any of my actions where I'm exercising freedom of speech and expression is in conflict with constitutional values or is in conflict with the law, then the law will take its course. For example, if I make a hateful speech where I am inciting certain people to go and attack people from a specific community, then I can be charged under the provisions of the BNS, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, for inciting violence or for spreading hateful speech. But before I make that speech, I don't need to take any approval. But movies in India are on a different plane altogether as compared to any other form of expression. The reason for that is because movies are perhaps the only form of expression in India which undergo what we call as pre-censorship. So therefore, movies in India stand on a completely different plane as compared to any other form of expression. Because for any other form of expression, I do not need to take the prior approval of the government. They do not undergo what is called as pre-censorship or prior censorship. But movies do. Now, UPSC first wants me to know that how movies stand on a different plane when it comes to other forms of freedom of speech and expression. And which is basically that movies are the only form of expression which are being subject to prior censorship. The second is that they are further asking me, and actually the question is that why is it that movies stand on a different plane as compared to other forms of expression in India, which basically is that why is it that only movies are undergoing pre-censorship? And the reason for that is because they have tendency to disturb public order, especially because audiovisual media has such kind of impact on our psychology. If I read something which is mentioned in a newspaper article, and if I read this and if I watch the same thing on in a movie on the big screen, then the kind of psychological impact that it can have on me is going to be way more than reading any text. Not only that, but the kind of reach the movies have in India, or for that matter anywhere in the world, is way more than as compared to the newspapers or any books or any kind of other form of expression. Because to be able to read a newspaper, to be able to read a magazine or a journal, you need to be educated, you need to be literate, you need to have basic literacy skills. But if you are an individual who does not have any literary skills, despite that you can understand what is happening on the screen because of the audiovisual. Just try out an experiment that even if you are watching a movie in some other language, you may not be able to understand the entire movie, but you will definitely be able to understand parts of it simply because there is audio and visual that is there. So the kind of reach that movies have, the kind of impact that they have on the society, on the individual psychology, they have potential to cause grave violence, they have potential to cause grave public disorder in the society, and that is why movies in India are subject to prior censorship. For that matter, Supreme Court in a very important case in the 1980s, where Justice Hidayatullah, who was the former CJI, was sitting on the bench, had stated that movies in India being subject to prior censorship is not a violation of Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution. No doubt that movies are subject to prior censorship, but there is a logic and reasoning behind that. Now, this very simple concept is what was asked by UPSC in context of what was happening at that point of time in the country. There were a few movies that had been subject to bans by different state governments in India when this particular question had been asked in the examination. Why am I telling you all of this? Because if we have to truly make sense of what we read in the newspapers, I'm sure that when you're reading newspapers, a lot of times you get confused that why is this news there, or what is the relevance of this news, or you are not able to understand the basics behind that news. Once you have control, grasp over a subject like polity, a lot of concepts, a lot of things that will be reading in the newspapers will become relatively much easier for you to understand. And that is the importance of polity as a subject, apart from the instrumental value that it has in prelims and in the mains examination. So that is the one thing, one example that we can be giving here. Second example that I would want to give is, I'm sure that you people have been following the news in the recent days, and that there has been a massive upheaval that has taken place in Bengal politics, and we have come across what is called as defections in the Trinamool Congress in Bengal. Now, UPSC is not going to necessarily ask you a question on whether this should have happened or not. The politics of it is not what UPSC is interested in, but they want you to understand what is the law that exists in India to prevent defections. So as you people would know, we enacted in 1985 a law called as the anti-defection law. It's also called as the Dal Badal Kanun. The aim of this law was to stop the culture of Ayaram and Gayaram politics that had entered into Indian politics across the country. Between 1960s to 1980s, there were almost 4,000 plus MLAs and MPs, those who had defected from their original party to another party after getting elected to the house. And most probably, most of these defections, defection basically means change in allegiance. Most of these defections would happen due to either lure of money or due to lure of some office which would be given to these members of parliament or members of legislative assemblies, legislative councils, etc. So this had become a big problem in Indian politics. This had started to create challenges with respect to giving more importance to the role of money power in elections, because more the money that a political party has, then they would have the possibility of buying the MLAs or the MPs from the opposition party. The second is that it had also brought instability into the governments in India, because whenever a government would be formed, there would always be a possibility that some of the members of the ruling party would defect to the opposition, again because they would be given some kind of promises by the opposition, and then it would create instability in Indian politics. And then of course it was promoting corruption as well. More importantly, what it was doing was the values of democracy were getting compromised. If I have elected an individual to member of parliament or member of state legislature as a citizen, I have not elected them only on the basis of who they are, but also on the basis of which political party they belong to. Now, if they go and switch the political party once they have been elected to the house, does it not defeat the electoral mandate? Does it not defeat the wish of the people of the country? So, whenever we are studying any topic, it's important for me to know the background of that particular provision of the constitution or that law. I need to understand that what is that provision of the constitution trying to fix? Why did we need an anti-defection law in India in the first place? So I need to understand the background and the philosophy. Then I need to go into what is anti-defection law, what are the provisions of anti-defection law. Then I need to know how the anti-defection law has worked in India. And then in that, I need to further know that what are some of the shortcomings in the anti-defection law that we need to address. If there are any suggestions that have been given by any expert committees of the government on the issue of anti-defection and what are the changes that are supposed to be brought out in the law. And additionally, I also need to know that what are some of the advantages of enacting this anti-defection law. So I need to know all of these things, and you cannot be separating mains preparation from prelims preparation in a topic like this. I'll show you very shortly that how in prelims examination the focus will be more on what, but in the mains examination the focus will be more on the analysis of the anti-defection law, whether it has worked well in India or not, whether do we need some reforms or not. See, I mean, something like this happening in Bengal, it has happened in Maharashtra also very recently and in several other states. The question that it raises is that what is the anti-defection law doing? It shows in many ways the failure of anti-defection law in India if such mass defections are taking place in Indian politics. So for the mains, I need to know the analytical part. For the prelims, I need to know the what part more. Not that in prelims they may not ask conceptual questions, and we'll have a look at that shortly, but most probably in prelims questions are more based on the information, the what aspect. The why and the how aspects are covered in the mains questions, and that's what we are going to be looking at very shortly. Similarly, if you people would have been reading the newspapers and the social media, there is a lot of noise which has been created recently about the judges of the Supreme Court of India going to UK for playing badminton, and there are images and videos that have been floating around. And some people have been going on to criticize the judges of the Supreme Court of India by stating that when the judicial system in India is suffering from 5.5 crore cases in total, there is a huge pendency of cases. The reports and studies suggest that the number of years that it takes for a case from the time it is instituted in a lower court by the time it is disposed of in the Supreme Court of India on an average is 14 years. And on the other hand, judges of the Supreme Court of India are having merry and they are taking vacation and they are taking summer vacations, etc. and so on and so forth. Now, as someone who is a civil services aspirant, this is a very shallow view. Just to say that, oh, these people are having fun and they are not doing anything and they are enjoying summer vacations while the rest of the country is suffering, that is not absolutely correct. Of course, there is some grain of truth to that, but you have to also look at the workload that exists on the judges of the Supreme Court of India. Now, as a candidate who's preparing for the examination, you need to have a very balanced perspective. You cannot be talking like a person who's talking on the street or some of the mass influencers on YouTube talk like. You need to have a very nuanced view of these issues as a future administrator of the country. One of the examples that I always give to my students when we are talking about judicial pendency in India, and this is one of the criticisms, that the judges of the Supreme Court and High Courts in India go on summer vacations. But let me tell you this particular fact. In India, on an average, the Supreme Court sits for round about 240 days a year out of 365. Now, that does not mean that in the rest of the 125 days they are just having fun. They are not doing any work. The workload of a judge of the Supreme Court or the High Court is immense. What they are doing while sitting in the court is that they are listening to the arguments and they are writing their judgments. But when they are at home also, they are doing a lot of homework. They are reading a lot on the judgments that have been given by courts in other parts of the world. They are reading judgments of the Supreme Court of India that have been given previously. They are trying to understand the legal precedents that have been set in the country. Not just that, but they are also writing their judgments as well. When do you think that the judges would have the time to write these long judgments? If you look at the Puttaswamy judgment of the Supreme Court of India, right to privacy case, that judgment runs into hundreds of pages. Now, that judgment is not being generated with the help of ChatGPT or AI. Possibly there are some cases that have started to come like that as well, but something like Puttaswamy, there was no AI at that point of time. It was written by the judges with the help of their staff and with the help of their clerks. Now, that is not such an easy thing, and you have a lot of responsibility as well as the Supreme Court of India, that whatever you are saying, each and every sentence and each and every word that you are saying in your judgment will become the law of the land. So you have to be very careful that whatever you are writing in your judgment is absolutely thought about, something that you have analyzed properly, you have understood the pros and the cons of whatever you are mentioning. Because as I said, it is going to become the law of the land. So the point that I'm basically trying to make is, there was an article that had been written in newspapers recently by Mr. Kapil Sibal on why this allegation that is being put up against the Indian judiciary, that they are taking summer vacations, is actually not correct. Now let me give you a surprising fact. In United States of America, the average number of days for which the US Supreme Court sits in a year is somewhere around 40 days. Now, if we go by the same logic that people are giving, then that means that the Supreme Court of United States of America must be the most useless Supreme Court in the world, and they do not do any kind of work at all. And all 320 days of the year, apart from those 40 days when they are working on an average, they are just making merry. But that's not correct. Now, as a candidate, as I repeated earlier as well, for the civil services examination, I need to have a balanced perspective. Of course, I need to know that what are the reasons for judicial pendency in the country. It cannot be simply blamed on that the judges of the Supreme Court and the High Courts are going on a summer vacation. That's not the real reason. There are a number of other systemic issues that are associated with the rising pendency of cases in India. So as a candidate for the examination, I need to understand that. But for that, I need to have a control on the basics. And only then I'll be able to relate to whatever that is appearing in the newspapers. And do not be surprised if you find a question in the examination related to judicial pendency this year in mains, where they may give some aspect of this judges of the Supreme Court going on vacations and whether that is actually the correct assessment for judicial pendency in India, or are there other reasons as well which are at play. So the point that I'm basically trying to make is that whatever news that we read, most of it in some or the other way would be related to Indian constitution and polity. For that matter, even when you are reading something about artificial intelligence, do not think that it is completely divorced from law, because today we are consistently having conversation in India that we should bring a law to regulate the use of AI in India. We know that AI has significant advantages, but there are also a lot of dangers associated with the misuse of AI. So we need to have a law in the country in order to regulate the use of AI. And again, something which is related to science and technology is also related to polity and constitution. So the point that I'm trying to make is that polity's importance is not just because of the number of questions that are asked in prelims and mains examination, but a number of other topics, whether it is society, whether it is environment, whether it is science and technology, internal security, international relations, various aspects of governance. All of these are issues that are interconnected with the concepts of polity. I'll give you another example. There was a question that had been asked by UPSC in mains examination in 2013 in internal security. This is one of my favorite questions to quote to show that how UPSC interrelates two topics in the paper. Now, a lot of people are saying that this year, if you would have seen the prelims examination, ki ethics ke question kaise pooch liye prelims ke andar. But the fact of the matter is that UPSC has not really given some hard defined syllabus for prelims or for the mains examination. The pointers that have been mentioned in the syllabus are very broad. We are going to have a look at it very shortly. So that means that you need to be ready for preparation in such a manner that questions will be interrelated and there will be a lot of overlap between paper 1, 2 and 3 and 4 as well in the mains examination. So a question that had been asked by UPSC was that analyze the impact, I may not be writing the exact language, but the gist of the question was that analyze the impact of non-implementation of provisions of Article 244 Clause 1 on the rise of Naxalism in India. On the rise of Naxalism in India. So this was a question that had been asked by UPSC in 2013, but even though it is giving a reference to an article of the Indian Constitution, the question that was asked was actually in paper 3, internal security. ये internal security से related question था. I will not be able to answer this question until unless I know what the provisions of Article 244 Clause 1 of the Constitution are and how its implementation could have prevented the rise of Naxalism in India. Now, if you know about Schedule 5 of the Constitution, Article 244 Clause 1 relates to Schedule 5 of the Constitution. And Schedule 5 is basically providing certain protections to the tribals, those who are living in certain parts of India. We wanted that the tribals in India should be able to govern themselves, according to their own customs, traditions, etc. So they should have certain autonomy. Also, the other problem was that in the past, various tribal communities in India had been subject to exploitation by the outsiders in the name of money lending, or their land would be grabbed by the outsiders, and there would be interference which would be made by the governments in their customs, traditions, practices. So Schedule 5 of the Constitution was to provide protection to the tribals with respect to these matters. Now in this, I therefore need to know first the history of tribal exploitation in India, which I read in the history classes, the tribal uprisings. Then I need to know what are the provisions that we brought into the Constitution to address the problems that had happened in the past. For example, we have given powers to the governors in the states where Schedule 5 applies to make regulations which will act as laws for the purpose of regulating the activity of money lending in these areas. So a lot of times money lenders would go and give or lend money to the tribal community. They would not be often able to pay back the money, and they would charge exorbitant interest rates from them. And since they would not be either able to pay the principal or the interest amount, after some time tribal land would be usurped by the outsiders. So to prevent such kind of practices, we have given powers to the governors in India in order to make regulations to regulate the activity of money lending. So what I'm basically trying to say is, and now what happened as a result of that? Because these provisions of Article 244 were not implemented in true letter and spirit. They were mentioned in the Constitution, but they were not actually implemented in spirit. What happened is that the exploitation of the tribal community in India continued. And that created a gap which was filled by the Naxalites. Naxalites were able to win over the sympathy of the tribal people for their own ulterior motives, and they were able to foment such a violent movement in India. So the point that I'm trying to make is that here I need to know tribal history from my history lessons. I need to relate it to the provisions of Schedule 5 of the Constitution, and then I need to further relate it to the issue of left-wing extremism in India. So you see that UPSC is actually jumping across 3 papers in this particular question. Paper 1, Paper 2 and Paper 3. And this is the kind of preparation that I need to have if I need to do well in the mains examination. If you have to do well in the mains examination, then my preparation needs to be integrated. I cannot be studying topics in isolation. That's why here at the foundation batches as well, a lot of times some students say that, why is it that you people are not covering one subject at a time? And why is it that there are multiple subjects that are going on at a time? The reason for that is because your understanding also needs to be built in a comprehensive manner across subjects. If I just study polity and then I study history separately, then I will not be able to correlate, because I would not know anything about history. I'm studying polity, but I don't know that why this provision was introduced in Indian Constitution because of historical reasons. If I don't understand those interconnections, then my understanding is going to be very superficial, and you cannot expect to do well in mains examination. Not just that, but in prelims examination as well, now UPSC is expecting you to be able to draw these linkages between various concepts and subjects. And that is something which is at the core of preparation for this examination. And that's why I keep telling students that please do not be worried that why is it that सारी पॉलिटी की क्लासेस क्यों नहीं हो रही हैं, सारी हिस्ट्री की क्लासेस क्यों नहीं हो रही हैं. आई डोंट थिंक दैट इज़ अ गुड स्ट्रैटेजी फॉर समवन हु इज प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर दिस एग्जामिनेशन. अगर आपको बस एक फीलिंग या सेंस चाहिए कि हमने तैयारी कर ली तो ठीक है, पर अगर आपको जेन्युइनली एग्जाम के लिए तैयार होना है, देन इट इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट you connect all the subjects as much as possible. Ethics is related to constitution. Internal security is related to constitution. Internal security is related to governance, international affairs. It is related to world history. Similarly, when I am reading about environment, it is related to geography, it is related to history, and it is related to law as well, because ultimately, how will I prevent environmental degradation? How will I ensure sustainable development? With the help of laws. So I need, and then it is also related to geography. I cannot be having same laws for every part of India. The laws that I will have for environmental regulation in the coastal areas will be significantly different for that I will be having for the Gangetic plains, because the ecology is very different. So this is what we have to understand, that preparation for polity as a subject is not only important because of it will fetch you marks in prelims and mains examination, but because it will help you in building overall conceptual clarity with respect to the entire syllabus. Because ultimately, the basis of how the government is functioning in India is the constitution of the country. So until unless I understand constitution and the political system of India, I cannot expect to understand what are the problems that exist in the governance systems of the country. Okay, so I hope that I'm making some sense here of how you need to interrelate various topics and various subjects when you are preparing for both mains as well as for the prelims examination, and also that tells us about the importance of polity as a subject. Now, this is the other aspect, of course, the instrumental value of polity as a subject in prelims and mains. You will see that there is an anomaly in 2026. There has been a drastic drop in number of questions that were asked from polity this year. And that also was one of the reasons because of which the paper ended up becoming slightly difficult. Not slightly difficult, quite difficult. Because usually students would expect that there will be questions from polity, economy, geography, and some doable questions from modern history. If we do all of them together, then we should be able to get at least 30-40 questions correct, and then some of the other questions we'll be able to use some logic, our own knowledge, understanding, etc. of current affairs, and then we'll be able to solve maybe 15, 20, 25 questions more. But this year, because the number of questions that were asked in the prelims examination from polity were so less, that made the paper more difficult. Because usually polity is an easier subject. Why is it an easier subject? Because it's a very conceptual subject. It's like physics. Once I know the concept behind a particular provision of the Indian Constitution, then whatever question that UPSC asks, I will be able to solve that question, because it does not require so much of factual knowledge. So एक बार concept पढ़ा, उसको फिर मैं different situations में लगा सकता हूँ. But possibly in a subject like ancient history or medieval history, where there was a lot of emphasis this year in the prelims examination, you need some factual basis as well. You need a lot of factual knowledge as well, and that is why the paper ended up becoming so difficult this year. So this is one of the things that every year you will find that almost 15 to 18 questions will be asked from polity. Of course, this year was an anomaly year, but you cannot say anything that next year it will be the same weightage that will be given to polity. Maybe next year polity will make a comeback and you will have 15 questions. But again, having said that, as I said earlier, मेंस के अंदर तो डेफिनेटली पॉलिटी से क्वेश्चन आएंगे ही आएंगे, तो मुझे वो टॉपिक तो प्रिपेयर करना ही है किसी भी हालत में. और दूसरी बात ये जो मैंने समझाया कि और बहुत सारे टॉपिक्स की जो लिंकेज है पॉलिटी के साथ, वो भी तो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. देन द सेकंड इज, इफ आई टॉक अबाउट मेंस एग्जामिनेशन, Now in mains examination, out of 1750 marks which are allocated for the 7 papers, 7 into 250, you will find that the polity section has a direct weightage of almost 125 to 150 marks in GS paper 2. But as I have just shown you, in internal security, in ethics, in environment, in various topics related to society, international relations as well, there would be concepts of polity which would apply. So that's another important reason why polity becomes so important. And not just that, but I am just talking of the direct questions that are being asked in polity in GS paper 2. But if you look at governance portion, that also requires some knowledge of polity and the way the political system functions in the country. So almost 30-40 marks more in paper 2 would be related to polity indirectly. Plus on top of that, the 8 topics that I get to write the essay in the mains examination, you will find that either directly there will be one topic which will definitely have a lot of weightage or implications with respect to political system, law, legal system. And even if it is not, any question that they ask, there would always be something that I can write related to polity. I'll give you a very simple example. UPSC had given a topic in essay, which was that the cradle that rocks the hand that rocks the cradle should also rule the world. So cradle is basically palna, right? So the hand that rocks the cradle. So they're talking about women. Women, those who are responsible for bringing up the children in the entire human society, and that's primarily a responsibility which has been given to the women. We'll not get into what are the reasons, etc., and good and bad of that, but the fact that this is a responsibility that has been given to the women, and they are the ones, those who are rocking the cradle, they should also be ruling the world. Now when I'm talking about this, I can also be talking about that how women representation in law making is very poor, not just in India but across the world. Look at the number of legislators that we have in the parliament, those who are women. Look at the number of women, those who are in the judiciary. Look at the number of women, those who are in police. So there are certain systemic biases which are there, and we have tried to address some of these issues. India has in a way shown the way to the rest of the world as well, that how you can improve the involvement of women in the governance by providing reservations to them in the Panchayati Raj institutions and urban local bodies. But then if I have read polity properly, then I would also know that even though I have made such a law, but actually it has not been implemented very effectively in the country. Why? Because we still have the concept of Sarpanchpati that exists in various rural areas. Because of the patriarchal attitudes that exist in the society, women leaders are not taken very seriously in the panchayats and in the urban local bodies. Not just that, but women have a dual responsibility, unfortunately, in the Indian society. Not only do they have to play their role as a public representative when they are elected as a sarpanch of a particular village panchayat, but they are also supposed to be taking care of the family at home. So that means that they have a dual responsibility, and there is ultimately you have 24 hours in the day. So how much can you do on both the sides? And as a result of that, either of these things end up getting compromised, and usually it's the professional duties of a woman which ends up getting compromised. Now this is the larger question which is related to societal issues as well. The point that I'm basically trying to make is that I can write a number of points in my essay when I'm writing about this particular topic of that the hand that rocks the cradle must also rule the world, drawing examples from polity and my understanding of the Indian constitution and the legal systems. So there also it has a lot of application, and therefore it ends up becoming one of the most important subjects as far as your entire preparation for the examination is concerned. So that's as far as polity as a subject and its importance for the mains and for the prelims examination, and generally for doing well in this examination at all the 3 stages is concerned. Now let me quickly talk about what are the sources that you people need to refer as far as polity section is concerned. Now this is something which is always very worrisome as an issue for most of the candidates, those who are preparing for the examination. My suggestion to you for all the subjects and not just for polity would be that keep a minimal list of your resources. It's better to read the same concept number of times rather than reading the same concept from one source a number of times rather than reading the same concept from different books differently. Because to be able to absorb things better, to be able to retain them, ultimately I have to reproduce content also in the examination. It's better that I do not stretch the number of resources that I have. So whatever I'm going to tell you, in my opinion, this is more than sufficient for the subject of polity.
Same goes for history, geography, ethics, internal security, disaster management, society, and any other subject, that you should try to keep a very basic list of your resources. Do not go beyond them. Unless you are in your third, fourth attempt, you have some time and you're only preparing for the examination. Maybe for value addition, you can read some other texts. But usually I tell students that focus on practicing more, focus on using your knowledge more in the questions rather than trying to accumulate more knowledge, because the only way the examiner is going to judge how much we know is how much we write on the paper. The examiner is not going to go to my home and see the number of books that I have read. And in fact, I have seen that mostly candidates, those who end up reading more books, are the ones those who do not end up succeeding in this examination. This exam actually requires you to do certain average things, but with a lot of consistency. You do not need excellence. You do not necessarily need brilliance in your answers. But what you need is consistency in your answers. And we'll be discussing more about that to come. So what are some of the things that I need to have as far as sources are concerned? The first and the foremost is that I need to have a good hold over the syllabus of the examination. So this is one suggestion that I give to all my students, that what you should do is that all the 4 papers of general studies, you copy and paste the syllabus into a Word document, reduce the font size, adjust the margins, etc., and adjust that onto 2 or maybe 4 pages in total. And then put these or stick these copies of the syllabus in your room. Not just that, but also carry copies with you every time whenever you are traveling for classes or for work or for whatever with you. Why am I saying that is because every day compulsorily you should spend at least 5 minutes to just read the syllabus of the examination. It is very important that you literally memorize the syllabus of the examination. There are 2 important reasons for that. One is because when you will be reading the newspapers, whether I need to read this X news or Y news or not will depend upon whether it relates to something in the syllabus or not. So I need to know the syllabus for that first. Otherwise, I'll be wasting a lot of time on reading the newspapers, which many of you struggle with. The second is that if I have an understanding of the syllabus of the examination, then writing answers in the examination also becomes easier. Now, why is that? Because let's say if I'm writing an essay and I'm not able to think of various dimensions, then I can start thinking from the perspective of the syllabus only and start writing various dimensions. For example, this same topic of the hand that rocks the cradle must rule the civilization. Now, this I can write about role of women in science and technology. I can write about role of women in governance. I can talk about the role that women can play in agriculture. I can talk about the role that the women have played in history and the kind of examples that we know of history of where women have played a significant role, not just in our independence struggle, but various contributions that they have made to the society in the past. I can relate it to the concept of environment as well. I can relate it to the concept of health, nutrition, education also. Because usually it has been seen that wherever women leaders are in power, the indicators related to health, education, poverty, sanitation, drinking water are much better as compared to the other constituencies or places where men are in power. So I can draw examples from the help of the syllabus to write answers, to write essays, and that's why knowing the syllabus becomes very important. And the third and the most important reason why syllabus is so important is because if I do not really know what is my progress on a daily basis, then I will lose track. Syllabus is there in front of me. I know that I have covered 30% of the syllabus, or there are 20 topics that are mentioned. I have covered 5 topics or 6 topics and I have 14 more to go. So it helps to keep your preparation also on track. So therefore, I would recommend to all of you that you please print copies of the syllabus, not just of GS but of your optional paper as well, and put it on walls at different places in your room. Plus also carry multiple copies. Have a copy ready on your phone as well, in WhatsApp or whatever, and that you should be every day making it a routine that on this time of the day, it can be 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock or morning, whatever, that I will give 5 minutes, 10 minutes to just reading syllabus. Do this exercise for at least 2 to 4 weeks. And once you have a good grasp over what all is there in the syllabus, then preparation will become much easier. I can tell you that I often ask my students when they come to me that, sir, I have not qualified prelims, I have not qualified mains. I often ask them, can you just write down the topics that are mentioned in the syllabus of the examination? That's the first test that I take for most of my students to judge that whether they are actually serious about preparation for the examination or not. If you do not know the syllabus of the examination, then what the hell are you preparing for anyway? So it's very important that you know the syllabus literally like the back of the hand. So this is the first and the most important source for the preparation of the examination. No book, no previous year questions, but syllabus. Now, what are the other sources that I need to refer as far as polity is concerned? If I have some kind of background in political science, or if I have studied humanities in school in grade 11th and 12th, or it was a part of my graduation, I've studied law or maybe social sciences in some way or the other, then I can skip these two books and I can start from the class 11th NCERT, which is Indian Constitution at Work. But apart from this, there is another important book that you should refer for advanced learners, and that is, and now that does not mean that the basic learners will not refer these books, but for basic learners, first you have to refer these books and then move on to the advanced books. So the other book that you can refer is the Political Theory NCERT, which has been written. So this is a political science book which has been written. इसके अंदर भी सिंपल तरीके से ही कॉन्सेप्ट्स को एक्सप्लेन किया गया है. लॉट ऑफ क्वेश्चंस दैट हैव बीन आस्क्ड इन द प्रीलिम्स एंड द मेंस एग्जामिनेशन इन द रीसेंट पास्ट हैव बीन बेस्ड ऑन सर्टेन वेरी बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट्स व्हिच हैव बीन आस्क्ड डायरेक्टली फ्रॉम दिस पर्टिकुलर बुक. So these two books are literally non-negotiable. Now sometimes students ask me that is it necessary to read these NCERTs? See, the first and the foremost thing is that you need to ask yourself, why am I reading the NCERT? The reason for that is because some of the basic concepts have been covered in a very easy manner in the NCERTs. That's all. It's not that UPSC is going to directly ask questions from NCERT, but it is important because some of the most important basic concepts have been covered in a very lucid, very easy, uncomplicated manner by these NCERTs with the help of examples. So that is why reading these two NCERTs becomes very important. If you are someone who is a beginner to the subject of polity, then I would suggest that you should start from these two particular books, class 9th NCERT Democratic Politics 1 and class 10th NCERT Democratic Politics 2, and then you can subsequently move to this. And please understand one thing, these are NCERTs, these are very simply written books. First, what I should do is that I should give a good reading of the book in the पहली एक reading मैं करूँ, which can take maybe, let's say for the NCERT related to Indian Constitution and Work, it can take me, let's say, 3 or 4 days. I don't think that if you have even an average reading speed, it should take you more than 4 to 5 days or maybe more than a week to cover this book entirely. Once I have done that, then I should come back to this book in a few days again, because what also happens is that our subconscious mind is also working. So when we feed some knowledge or information to our mind, consciously of course we are using that information, but subconsciously also our mind works. So if I revisit that book after maybe 10 days or 15 days and I go through that book, at that point of time I should start underlining important things in the book. I should try to interrogate more from the book, that what is this concept that is written. I am not able to understand this, let me take the help of AI, or let me take the help of Google and try to search on this particular concept. Or let me try and refer some other source, or let me go to my teacher, or let me go to my senior, or let me go to my friend to understand that particular concept which I am not able to understand in the NCERT. But I would genuinely recommend to all of you that please do go through these two NCERTs. They are very well written and they are uncomplicated, as I said earlier also. But if you're someone who's not had any background in social science, you are someone who's scared of the subject of polity, constitution, political system, then I would suggest that you start from this. Then there are certain other essential books also that I need to refer. The other essential books are any of the standard textbooks. So it could be a Subhash Kashyap, it could be a Lakshmikant, it could be a D.D. Basu, the choice is yours. A lot of times students come and ask me that, sir, I have not read Lakshmikant, I have read Subhash Kashyap, will there be a problem? No, there will not be much of a problem. The reason for that is because ultimately most of these books cover most of the concepts. But having said that, there is no doubt that one book which has been revised consistently according to the requirements of the examination is Lakshmikant. But having said that, I always tell my students that you should not start your preparation of polity with Lakshmikant, because that book is written in a very insipid manner. Do you understand? Insipid. It's written जिसको बोलते हैं ना कि रस नहीं है किताब के अंदर, आप उसको पढ़ना स्टार्ट करेंगे तो ऐसा लगता है कि एकदम बिल्कुल नीरस तरीके से किताब लिख दी है ये। तो अगर आप एनसीईआरटी पढ़ेंगे तो वो एक स्टोरी फॉर्म में कॉन्सेप्ट्स को एक्सप्लेन करता है। एक बार आप एनसीईआरटी पढ़ लें तो उसके बाद अगर आप लक्ष्मीकांत पे जाएंगे देन यू विल बी एबल टू रिलेट एंड अंडरस्टैंड द कॉन्सेप्ट्स इन अ मच बेटर मैनर। पहली बात ये। दूसरी बात ये कि I always keep telling successful candidates as well that please do not just go and say कि हमने तो केवल लक्ष्मीकांत पढ़ी थी और हमारा एग्जाम हो गया। ये गलत बात है। उसका रीज़न ये है क्योंकि आपने न्यूज़पेपर्स भी पढ़े, आपने कहीं ना कहीं कोचिंग क्लासेस अटेंड करी, आपने वहाँ के नोट्स भी रेफ़र किए, आपने बहुत सारी और चीज़ों को भी बेस बनाया और उसके ऊपर आपने लक्ष्मीकांत किया, एंड दैट इज़ हाउ यू वर एबल टू गेट सक्सेस इन द एग्जामिनेशन। टू जस्ट से दैट केवल लक्ष्मीकांत पढ़ के जो है मेरे सारे क्वेश्चंस हो गए, दिस इज़ नॉट ट्रू, एंड वी विल हैव अ लुक एट सम ऑफ द क्वेश्चंस एज वेल, एंड यू विल फाइंड दैट केवल लक्ष्मीकांत से वो क्वेश्चंस नहीं हो सकते। स्पेशली मेंस के अंदर जिस तरीके के एनालिटिकल सवाल यूपीएससी पूछ रही है, अगर आप केवल लक्ष्मीकांत के ऊपर रहेंगे तो देन यू विल बी इन अ बिग मेस। सो इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट यू नो हाउ टू यूज लक्ष्मीकांत, okay, or for that matter any book. Choice is completely yours. Of course, out of the three, I would say specific to the examinations requirement, Lakshmikant is most sufficient, but at the same time, the drawback is that it's written in such an insipid manner. Subhash Kashyap has two books which I would suggest that you can refer. One is a book called as Our Political System by Subhash Kashyap, and the other one is Our Constitution. तो वो दोनों बुक्स आपको पढ़नी पड़ेंगी। इनफैक्ट मैं रेकमेंड करता हूँ अगर आप आर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ना भी पढ़ें और लक्ष्मीकांत पढ़ रहे हैं तो आर पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम तो एक बार जरूर देख लीजिएगा, बिकॉज some of the concepts related to the functioning of the political system in India have been written in an excellent manner in Subhash Kashyap, even though the book is old, even though the book has not been revised, because वो सरकारी पब्लिकेशन है, NBT की पब्लिकेशन है, तो वो उसको रिवाइज नहीं किया उन्होंने, and but despite that the concept, the way they have been explained in our political system book, I would suggest that that's excellent. तो आप उसको रेफर कर सकते हैं, but see it again, what I said at the beginning, there is no one single right strategy. You have to find what works for you. आपके पास कितना टाइम है, आपकी क्या रीडिंग स्पीड है, एंड ऑल ऑफ दोज थिंग्स। मेरा सजेशन रहेगा पहले बेसिक मिनिमम कीजिएगा, एनसीईआरटी कीजिए और डीडी बसु, सुभाष कश्यप, लक्ष्मीकांत में से एक किताब कीजिएगा, ऑफ कोर्स अलॉन्ग विद वट एवर यू वुड बी knowing in the classes and whatever that is being taught to you in the class. Anyway, then apart from that, previous year questions, prelims and mains previous year questions, I should have all of them ready at one place from 2013 onwards. Ideally, I should have them segregated according to the subtopics that have been asked in the exam. तो एग्जीक्यूटिव से रिलेटेड क्या क्वेश्चन पूछे उसके अलग क्वेश्चंस, अलग सेग्रीगेशन होना चाहिए। लेजिस्लेचर से रिलेटेड क्या क्वेश्चन पूछे उसका अलग सेग्रीगेशन होना चाहिए। क्वेश्चन रिलेटेड टू जुडिशरी अलग सेग्रीगेशन होना चाहिए, सो दैट वेन एवर आई एम रीडिंग एनी टॉपिक आई नो कि इस पर्टिकुलर टॉपिक को मैं समझता हूँ कि नहीं समझता हूँ विद द हेल्प ऑफ प्रीवियस ईयर क्वेश्चंस। तो वो सेग्रीगेशन होना ज़रूरी है। आई वुड ऑल्सो रिकमेंड दैट यू बाय द previous year questions which are unsolved. Do not buy the solved ones. The reason for that is that most of the times the previous year solved questions which are available in the market are not of the best quality. कई बार वो गलत आंसर दे देता है and so many other things. So just go for the questions. Now, how do I get to know what are the answers for those questions? Especially mains के लिए, prelims के तो चलिए आंसर मिल जाएंगे, mains के लिए मुझे क्या पता चलेगा कि कैसे आंसर लिखने थे उन questions के? For that you should refer our YouTube channel. If you go on our YouTube channel, you will find a playlist of the discussion of previous year questions. Every year, whenever the mains examination happens, within a few days, we conduct sessions on discussion of that particular mains paper. 2015 से अभी तक 2026 तक, पिछले 11 साल में जितने भी जनरल स्टडीज पेपर 2 के पेपर्स हुए हैं, पॉलिटी, गवर्नेंस सेक्शन, except I think 1 year in 2019 when Rajesh sir had taken those sessions, everything has been covered by me only. तो आपको वो पूरी एक प्लेलिस्ट मिल जाएगी वहाँ पर, जहाँ पे सारे क्वेश्चंस मैंने डिटेल में डिस्कस किए हुए हैं कि क्यों यूपीएससी ने वो क्वेश्चन पूछा, देन हाउ आई शुड हैव अप्रोच दैट क्वेश्चन इन द एग्जामिनेशन, फ्यूचर के अंदर अगर ऐसा कोई क्वेश्चन आता है तो मेरे को उसके लिए कैसे तैयारी करनी चाहिए, एंड दैट इज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट guiding device that I have for preparation in the examination, previous year questions. And then one very important source that I need to have for polity is the bare act of the Constitution of India. Now what I am having this small handbook of the Constitution of India, एकदम ये pocket size है, but आपको जो है वो पीले रंग में भी मिलेगी, नीले में भी मिलेगी, ऑरेंज में मिलेगी, वाइट में मिलेगी, does not matter. Just go to the bookseller and tell that I want the बेयर एक्ट ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन विदाउट एनी काइंड ऑफ कमेंट्री एक्सेट्रा. जो सबसे चीपेस्ट वर्जन हो बेयर एक्ट का वो खरीद लीजिएगा. नथिंग इज गोइंग टू चेंज फ्रॉम वन वर्जन टू द अदर. कमेंट्री वाला लेने की जरूरत नहीं है हमें, जिसमें एक्सपर्ट ने अपनी कमेंट्री दे रखी है कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोविजंस पे या जजमेंट्स ऑफ द कोर्ट ऑन दोस पर्टिकुलर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोविजन. सो देयरफॉर I would recommend that you should have the bare act of the constitution as well. How do I add value to my answers from current affairs? Then I need to read the newspapers regularly. And again, the newspaper reading should not be done in such a manner that मैं बैठ के सारे टॉपिक्स के नोट्स बना रहा हूँ, बिकॉज फिर तो मेरा सारा समय जो है वो न्यूज़पेपर के नोट्स बनाने में ही निकल जाएगा. सो देयरफॉर व्हाट वी हैव सीन सक्सेसफुल कैंडिडेट्स डू इन द पास्ट इज दैट कोई इंपॉर्टेंट एडिटोरियल आया है न्यूज़पेपर के अंदर जो उनको लगता है कि किसी इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अथॉरिटी ने लिखा है, फॉर्मर जज ऑफ द सुप्रीम कोर्ट ऑफ इंडिया, फॉर्मर चीफ इलेक्शन कमिश्नर, मे बी अ सिटिंग मिनिस्टर और समथिंग लाइक दैट. द प्राइम मिनिस्टर हैज़ मेड सम स्पीच, द प्रेसिडेंट हैज़ मेड सम स्पीच. सो आई कैन रीड दोज एंड पॉसिबली टेक अ कटिंग ऑफ दोज. और नाउ तो अब आपके पास सारा टेक्नोलॉजी है, एवरीथिंग इज देयर. यू जस्ट इंश्योर दैट यू पुट इट इन टू AI, टेक द जिस्ट ऑफ दैट. बट इसका मतलब ये नहीं आर्टिकल नहीं पढ़ेंगे, आर्टिकल पढ़िए, उसका जिस्ट निकालिए और उसको कहीं पे एक अपने एवर नोट में या वन नोट में या कहीं पे रख लीजिएगा. सो दैट लेटर ऑन जब मैं एक्चुअल वैल्यू एडिशन करने बैठूंगा अपने नोट्स के अंदर, आई विल हैव ऑल ऑफ दिस रेफरेंस रेडी फॉर मी. द सेकेंड थिंग इज दैट आई वुड सजेस्ट you can use Mains 365 and PT 365 kind of a material for value addition to your answers as well. Because as you would have seen in Mains 365, we do not only cover the current topic or the issue at hand, but we also cover the background of it. तो आपको सब कुछ जो है एक पर्टिकुलर टॉपिक के रिस्पेक्ट में जो आपको एग्जामिनेशन के लिए चाहिए होगा वो एक ही जगह के ऊपर मिल जाता है. एंड देयरफॉर इट डज नॉट मेक सेंस फॉर यू टू मेक नोट्स आउट ऑफ करंट अफेयर्स. आइडियली if you do not have a lot of time, you should just read newspapers thoroughly, properly. Of course, अगर कोई बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट आर्टिकल लगता है तो जैसे मैंने उसको बोला कटिंग उसकी निकाल के, और यू कैन टेक द टेक्स्ट ऑफ दैट एंड पुट इट इन योर नोट्स समवेयर इन अ डिजिटल फॉर्मेट. बट उससे ज़्यादा मत कीजिएगा. There is no need of making notes every day for the newspapers, because then it will become too humongous an exercise and most of your time will be going into reading the current affairs alone. The other thing is Indian Express Explained and the Hindu Explained. These are two excellent sources for preparation for polity. इसमें टाइम टू टाइम आप देखेंगे आर्टिकल्स आते हैं जहाँ पे बहुत ही बेसिक तरीके से बहुत ही कॉम्प्लिकेटेड इश्यूज को एक्सप्लेन किया जाता है. एंड आई हैव सीन दिस दैट न्यूमरस क्वेश्चंस आर बीइंग आस्क्ड बाय UPSC which were directly covered in Indian Express Explained. इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि UPSC Indian Express Explained देखकर क्वेश्चन बना रहा है. वो कोइंसिडेंस ये हो रहा है that UPSC is asking question on an important topic which was in news, and because it was in news, because it was very prominent, Indian Express Explained और Hindu Explained would have also covered that topic, जिसमें उन्होंने पूरा बैकग्राउंड दिया होगा, उसके एनालिसिस दिया होगा टॉपिक का. सो देयरफॉर इफ यू कैन, आई वुड सजेस्ट दैट Indian Express Explained पढ़िएगा. Again, this is not to advertise Indian Express or Hindu here, but the fact is that these are the only two good newspapers that we have which are relevant for preparation for civil services examination. Then apart from that, summary of ARC reports. Now you will find the summary of ARC reports. Again, I have covered separately in a video how do you use the ARC reports for preparation. तो अगर आप YouTube पे जाएंगे तो you will find videos again on our YouTube channel on how to effectively use the ARC reports for our preparation. And I do not need to read the entire report. For that matter, I don't even need to read the entire summary as well. Even if I read recommendations related to certain topics, that should be enough. Because when I know the recommendations, I also know what the problem would have been. For example, one example that I always give is, अगर मुझे E-governance का टॉपिक प्रिपेयर करना है गवर्नेंस के लिए, तो मैं सेकेंड ARC की रिकमेंडेशंस पढ़ लेता हूँ ना, E-governance के रिस्पेक्ट में क्या दी हुई हैं उन्होंने. जब मेरे को रिकमेंडेशंस पता चलेंगी तो मुझे ये पता चलेगा कि what are the problems as well and what are the way forward that has been suggested by the second ARC with respect to E-governance. मैं उसके शॉर्ट नोट्स बना लूँ, बस उतना ही मुझे बस करना है. और अगेन मैं बार बार बोल रहा हूँ कि AI है अब आपके पास, तो यू कैन पिक अप द टेक्स्ट फ्रॉम द सेकेंड ARC recommendations का, put that into AI, tell AI that on the basis of these recommendations, tell me what the possible problems are with respect to E-governance in India, what are the suggestions that have been given by second ARC, what are some of the benefits of E-governance. ऐसे कुछ करके आप उसको 4-5 prompts दे दीजिएगा और वो आपको structured तरीके से, बहुत ही अच्छी तरीके से आपको notes दे देगा on the basis of second ARC. So you have AI, use that effectively. not just in polity but in all the other subjects as well. But of course don't over rely on AI. ये मत बोलिए कि AI को ये लो content और मुझे बता दो notes दे दो बना के. It will not work. You have to give the right kind of prompts as well to the AI. You have to tell that what specifically you are seeking. और जितना structured तरीके से आप AI से पूछेंगे उतना ही structured तरीके से वो आपको reply करेगा, which will be useful for you. Anyway, then apart from that, the PRS website. So you should keep looking at PRS website from time to time, especially जो उनका blog वाला section है. The blog section that they have, it covers certain important topical issues, and it may be related to parliamentary functioning, or it may be related to some law, or it may be related to the office of the governor or president, or ordinance making powers or clemency powers, whatever. So keep having a look at their blog from time to time. और एक बार once in a while ये आपके पास एक कैलेंडर होना चाहिए अपने रूम के अंदर, जहाँ पे आप मार्क कर लें कि every day when I will get up, I will see what my task for the day was. और आप पहले से ही एक महीने का प्लान करके चलें that 7th of every month I am going to spend 2 hours on PRS website. The 10th of every month I am going to be going through the Indian Express explained articles of the last 1 week. Something like that. इस तरीके से अगर आप थोड़ा schedule set करेंगे तो then it will be easier to follow. Otherwise क्या होता है that if we are thinking कि हाँ PRS की website follow करेंगे और अगर मेरे पास कहीं सामने लिखा नहीं है तो मैं एक बार ही तो कर लूँगा but second time I will forget. And that's the end of it. तो अगर मेरे को उसको एक regular habit बनाना है, I should have it somewhere written, possibly on a calendar or on a digital calendar, that this is the time for you to refer the PRS now and PRS blog, and that has to be done periodically again. So these are some of the sources that you can refer as far as polity as a subject, polity, governance, constitution as a subject for prelims and mains is concerned. Now, what should be therefore my strategy for this exam? For subject of polity, क्या strategy ठीक रहेगी? And I also feel that strategy is perhaps the most abused and the misused word in the present day era. हर चीज़ को strategy बताया जाता है and all of that. First and foremost, अगर आपने movie देखी हो कुंग फू पांडा, ना? So in that the punchline of the movie is that there is no secret ingredient. There is no one way. See, this guy, he wants to become a warrior. And he's trying to get that secret sauce from his master. But ultimately, the master tells him that the secret sauce is nothing but it lies in the mirror. You have to change yourself. You have to adapt to according to the requirements of the examination. You have to become better. So there is no secret sauce. The point that I'm basically trying to make is, जो भी मैं अभी strategy बता रहा हूँ, जो मैंने initially भी बताया था, this is not the only strategy. You can use different strategies that work for you. But of course, broadly framework यही रहेगा. Now, having said that, strategy की बात करते हैं तो what is the strategy that I actually should have if I'm preparing a topic? Let's say अभी मैं shortly I will discuss the topic of ordinance making powers of the governor and the president with you, and we will have a look at some of the questions that have been asked in mains and prelims examination. So the process that I should follow for any topic, जैसे मेरे को ordinance making powers पढ़ना है, first मैं देखूंगा कि ये syllabus के अंदर कहाँ पे आता है ये topic. Right, so it comes under the topic of the executive that has been mentioned in the and separation of powers that has been mentioned in paper 2 of general studies. Then I will refer the NCERT related to that topic. अब मेरे को ordinance making power के respect में जो NCERT का chapter है या executive के respect में जो NCERT का chapter है, I will read that. Once I have done that, then I will go to topic wise PYQs on the topic of ordinance, and I will see what are the questions that UPSC has asked in prelims and in mains related to this topic. At this stage, I may not be able to answer those questions, but when I will refer those questions, तो मुझे एक understanding थोड़ी बहुत आ जाएगी of what UPSC expects me to know in this topic. मेरे को कितनी डेप्थ में जाना है इस टॉपिक के और कितनी डेप्थ में नहीं जाना है, ये प्रीवियस क्वेश्चंस से ही मुझे पता चल सकता है और कोई और तरीका नहीं है. अदरवाइज तो ऑर्डिनेंस जैसे टॉपिक के ऊपर भी मैं PhD कर सकता हूँ. पीपल आर डन PhD ऑन अ टॉपिक सच एज ऑर्डिनेंस. लोग पूरे बड़े बड़े रिसर्च पेपर्स और बहुत अपनी जो है पब्लिकेशंस निकाल देते हैं एक छोटे से टॉपिक के ऊपर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के. तो देन द स्काई इज द लिमिट इन एनी टॉपिक. सो वेयर डू आई स्टॉप? किस डेप्थ तक मुझे अपने आप को रोकना है? आई विल ओनली बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ द प्रीवियस ईयर क्वेश्चंस. फिर उसके बाद मैं अपने स्टैंडर्ड टेक्स्ट बुक पे जाऊँ या मैं क्लास में जाऊँ. सो in the class also, some of you, those who are students, I always keep telling that before you turn up for the class, you should have read at least the basic concept related to that particular topic, because we already tell you in the foundation batch what is the topic that will be covered in the next class. तो आप पहले से थोड़ा सा उसको पढ़ के आइएगा. देन इट इज़ ऑल्सो एक्सपेक्टेड कि आप प्रीवियस ईयर क्वेश्चंस भी देख कर आएंगे, जिससे जब आप क्लास अटेंड करें तो आपका दिमाग उस डायरेक्शन में चलेगा कि एम आई एबल टू फाइंड द आंसर्स टू दोज प्रीवियस ईयर क्वेश्चंस ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ व्हाट आई एम बीइंग टॉट इन द क्लास एंड व्हाटएवर इज बीइंग डिस्कस्ड इन द क्लास. दैट वे यू आर डूइंग एक्टिव लर्निंग. आप पैसिवली इंफॉर्मेशन रिसीव नहीं कर रहे हैं, आप अपने दिमाग को एंगेज कर रहे हैं. एंड द मोर यू एंगेज योर माइंड, द लॉन्गर यू विल बी एबल टू रिटेन दोज कॉन्सेप्ट्स इन दैट इंफॉर्मेशन. वंस आई हैव डन दैट, देन अगेन आई विल गो टू द PYQs. अब मैं वापस जाऊंगा एंड देन आई विल सी कि ओके, मैंने पहले PYQ, पहले NCERT पढ़ ली, फिर PYQ देखा, फिर उसके बाद क्लास अटेंड करी, बुक पढ़ी, एंड देन आई अगेन गो बैक टू द PYQ एंड ट्राई एंड नाउ सॉल्व द PYQ. Both prelims and mains. I'll try to write the answers, I'll try to solve the question and see where I stand. If there is some shortcoming, then it tells me that I have not understood the concept properly. Then I need to revise the concept again. I need to understand the concept again. And then again, you can always come to us. I have always told all my students that when it comes to any of the foundation batch students, or for that matter, any of the other courses that are being run by us, if you are my student of polity, even if you are not my student and if you're being taught by some other faculty here, you can always come to me with your answers to previous year questions and show that, sir, these are the answers that I have written. Can you please give feedback? Of course, I will not give feedback on all the answers that you have written. But even if I give you feedback on 10, 15 questions, I think you would get the direction. And you people are intelligent enough to use that direction to your advantage. बस उतना ही थोड़ा सा guidance चाहिए होता है, ये समझने के लिए कि क्या मेरे answers में गड़बड़ हो रही है. And we have done that with multiple students earlier. That एक बार उन्होंने आंसर लिखा, they come to us with answers. We tell them कि नहीं, इसमें ये प्रॉब्लम है, इसको आप ऐसे ठीक करके लाइए. फिर वो वापस लिख के आते हैं, मैं फिर बोलता हूँ उनको कि नहीं, इसमें ये प्रॉब्लम है अभी भी. Then they again go back and do that. जब आप ये एक्सरसाइज कुछ क्वेश्चंस के लिए मल्टीपल टाइम्स करते हैं, then you start building an understanding of कि UPSC एक्सपेक्ट क्या कर रहा है उस पर्टिकुलर क्वेश्चन के आंसर में. When you do that iterative process, and please remember that Rome was not built in a day. तो धीरे धीरे छोटे छोटे एफर्ट्स करते करते ही आप किसी भी सब्जेक्ट के अंदर इंप्रूव करेंगे. सो यू कैन नॉट एक्सपेक्ट कि सडनली मैंने पहली बार पढ़ा और उसके बाद प्रीवियस ईयर क्वेश्चन जो है सारे अटेम्प्ट हो जाएंगे. नहीं होता ऐसा. यू मे बी द मोस्ट ब्रिलियंट माइंड, बट यू विल फॉल्टर एट सम प्लेस और द अदर. एंड देयरफॉर इट इज ओके दैट इवन आफ्टर रीडिंग द कॉन्सेप्ट मल्टीपल टाइम्स मैं प्रॉपरली प्रीवियस ईयर क्वेश्चन स्पेशली मेन्स के आंसर नहीं लिख पा रहा हूँ. इट इज ओके, यू विल लर्न. बट वॉट मैटर्स इज consistent efforts. What matters is that we have to consistently be perseverant with writing our answers, and we have to consistently make improvements in our answers. एक बार फिर वो हो गया, then I should move on to the answer writing, MCQ solving via test series questions. Then I should test myself now in the environment of the examination, because ultimately I may be able to write a very good answer to a question in 40 minutes. But the requirement of the examination is that I have to do it in 8 minutes or 10 minutes or 12 minutes. तो वो भी फिर मेरे को सीखना है. Timed practice. Initially when I will do timed practice, I may take more time. हो सकता है जब मैं, और ये बहुत candidates के साथ होता है, that when I start writing the answers to test series, मैं 20 में से 13 या 14 ही कर पाता हूँ. It is okay. Why? Because one, you need to be able to recollect content. और हमने इतनी बार रिवाइज नहीं किया होता कि हमें इमीडिएटली एग्जाम में वो याद आ जाए. सो बिकॉज ऑफ दैट वी आर नॉट एबल टू राइट द आंसर्स इन अ स्विफ्ट मैनर. सेकंड, ऑल्सो व्हाट टेंड्स टू हैपन इज दैट आवर कॉम्प्रिहेंशन स्किल्स आर ऑल्सो वेरी पुअर इन द बिगिनिंग. Our ability to decipher and to interpret the question is also very poor, which will also only improve over a period of time. You cannot expect quick changes. Some of you may have that knack because you may have studied such subjects in your graduation and in your school. आपका हो सकता है उस तरीके का ओरिएंटेशन हो, बट मोस्ट कैंडिडेट डू नॉट हैव दैट. स्पेशली साइंस से जो कैंडिडेट्स आते हैं, कॉमर्स से आते हैं, उनका वैसा ओरिएंटेशन नहीं होता है. सो डू नॉट गेट डिसहार्टन्ड, बिकॉज इफ यू लुक एट योर फ्रेंड दैट दे आर एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड द क्वेश्चन एंड दे आर एबल टू राइट द आंसर्स टू द क्वेश्चन सो क्विकली, आप भी वहां पहुंच जाएंगे. बस थोड़ा सा समय हो सकता है ज़्यादा लगेगा. बट द पॉइंट दैट वी हैव टू रिमेंबर इज कि एक दिन ज़रूर हम वहाँ पे पहुँच जाएंगे. आज नहीं होगा पर एक दिन ज़रूर होगा. राइट? सो इफ आई कीप दैट पर्टिकुलर थिंग इन माइंड, I will reach my destination at some point of time or the other. For different people, that pace of learning is different, but what counts is your effort. I personally believe that I am a very slow learner. मैं बहुत टाइम लेता हूँ कॉन्सेप्ट समझने के अंदर, मेरे को समय लगता है. बट मुझे ये पता है कि जब एक बार मेरा ग्रास्प आ जाता है कॉन्सेप्ट के ऊपर, देन I have complete understanding and clarity of that concept. So maybe always slow and steady wins the race. क्योंकि मैं अभी जल्दी से always slow and steady wins the race. क्योंकि मैं अभी जल्दी से कॉन्सेप्ट पढ़ लिया, मेरे को लग रहा है अरे वहाँ सिलेबस हो गया मेरा कंप्लीट, बट मैं क्वेश्चंस नहीं सॉल्व कर पा रहा हूँ, मेरे को कंसेप्चुअल क्लैरिटी नहीं है, मैं एक तरीके के क्वेश्चन से सॉल्व कर पा रहा हूँ, मैं फंस जा रहा हूँ दूसरे क्वेश्चन में, तो क्या फायदा है उसको पढ़ने का? बिकॉज देन इट विल टेक डबल द टाइम एंड मे बी ट्रिपल द टाइम. और उसमें एक और डेंजर है दैट कंसेप्ट एक बार अगर गड़बड़ बना लिया मैंने जल्दीबाजी के अंदर, देन उसको ठीक करना बड़ा मुश्किल होता है बाद में. तो योर फाउंडेशन हैज़ टू बी वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग एंड दैट्स वाई वी कीप टेलिंग स्टूडेंट्स दैट थोड़ा समय लगेगा. जैसे इवन फाउंडेशन कोर्सेज के अंदर वन इशू दैट सम स्टूडेंट्स ऑफन रेजेस कि सर आप टाइम बहुत ज़्यादा ले रहे हैं, 10 महीने में फाउंडेशन का कोर्स करा दीजिए, 8 महीने में करा दीजिए. हो ही नहीं सकता, मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ ये बात. अगर कोई भी आपको ये बोल रहा है कि मैं 8 महीने 10 महीने के अंदर सारा फाउंडेशन करवा दूंगा, प्रीलिम्स मेंस दोनों, वो आपको बेवकूफ़ बना रहा है. उसका सिंपल फैक्ट ये है क्योंककि आप देखिए ना सब्जेक्ट्स कितने सारे हैं. अगर सपोज कीजिए 1 साल है, 1 साल के अंदर 365 दिन है, सारे 365 दिन तो क्लास होगी नहीं. क्लासेस विल हैपन लेट्स से 330 डेज, मतलब 330 क्लासेस ही हैं. अब आप खुद सोच के देखिएगा 330 क्लासेस, 40-50 क्लासेस तो पॉलिटी के अंदर ही लग रही हैं, 40-50 क्लासेस इकोनॉमी में लग रही हैं, ज्योग्राफी के अंदर लग रही हैं. आप कैसे एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हैं कि वो सब कुछ जो है ऑल ऑफ दैट विल बी कवर्ड? तो 300 क्लासेस भी अगर वो है तो इट इज़ नॉट पॉसिबल. फिर कई बार स्टूडेंट्स कंप्लेन दैट सर 2 क्लासेस हो रही हैं दिन के अंदर. अब आपने ये बोला था कि आप जल्दी चाहते हैं कोर्स कंप्लीट हो, तो you cannot have both ways, right? It does take time, please understand, because मैं आपको एक सिंपल से एग्जांपल देता हूँ. फॉर पॉलिटी आई टेक राउंड अबाउट, अब 2.5 hours की क्लासेस होती हैं. अर्लियर वी यूज्ड टू हैव 3 hour classes. Earlier I used to take around 42 classes, 43 classes for polity. Now the number has touched somewhere around 48 to 50 depending upon the size of the batch and number of things. किस बैच में कितनी किसकी प्रिपरेशन है उसके ऊपर पेस पे चलता है वो. तो 48 to 50 क्लासेस उसमें लग रहा है. इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी ऑल्सो इट टेक्स ऑलमोस्ट 7 to 8 क्लासेस. एटलीस्ट उतना तो आप उसको टाइम देंगे बिकॉज 50 नंबर की वेटेज है उस टॉपिक की हर साल पेपर के अंदर. और कुछ कॉन्सेप्ट मेरे लिए बिल्कुल नए हैं, नक्सलिज्म, इंसर्जेंसी, मनी लॉन्ड्रिंग, टॉपिक सच एज ऑर्गेनाइज क्राइम, लिंकेजेस विद टेररिज्म. दीज आर न्यू कॉन्सेप्ट्स. आई हैव नेवर रियली रेड देम इन माई स्कूल और इन माई कॉलेज. सो इट विल टेक टाइम फॉर मी टू absorb those concepts. Governance, I usually end up taking 12 to 14 classes because again I'll be understanding the concept of self-help groups, I'll be understanding the concept of pressure groups, I'll be understanding the concept of the e-governance, I'll understand citizen charter, transparency, accountability. This will take time. Ethics, the governance portion that I take, that also ends up taking almost 8 classes because again corporate social responsibility पढ़ना है मुझे, वहाँ पे ethics and international relations पढ़ना है. I have to understand foundational values of civil services. I have to understand ethical dilemmas that exist in public institutions, private institutions. All of this is going to take time. You cannot expect a quick fix to things, and therefore it is very important for you to understand कि जल्दीबाजी में मत रहिएगा इस एग्जाम की प्रिपरेशन के लिए. इसका मतलब ये भी नहीं है कि 1 साल की प्रिपरेशन या 1.5 साल की प्रिपरेशन को 4 साल खींच दें, बट having said that, इतना समय लगेगा. You cannot expect that things will happen suddenly. So, अगर आपने जनवरी में कोर्स ज्वाइन किया है तो it will take 13-14 months for the entire syllabus to be covered, prelims, mains. But I can assure you that when it will be covered, you will have absolute conceptual clarity और आपको बस थोड़ी और मेहनत अपने आप से करनी होगी, which will require you to refer newspapers, which will require you to update your notes on the basis of newspapers, refer previous year questions. अगर आप उतना करेंगे तो you will be very well prepared. But जल्दी में मैं करूँ कि मैं 6 महीने में सब कुछ करने की कोशिश करूँ, नहीं हो सकता, हो ही नहीं सकता है. कैसे हो सकता है? So therefore don't fall into that trap where some people may tell you कि अरे हम तो 6 महीने में करवा देते हैं, 8 महीने में. हो ही नहीं सकता. ये मैं आपको गारंटी से बता रहा हूँ. बिकॉज या तो कॉम्प्रोमाइज़ होगा कहीं कॉन्टेंट के अंदर, इधर प्रीलिम्स पढ़ाया जाएगा और मेंस को जो है पूरी तरीके से इग्नोर कर दिया जाएगा, या फिर कुछ स्पेसिफिक टॉपिक्स कवर किए जाएंगे और जो कुछ पेरिफेरल टॉपिक्स होते हैं जो अब इंपॉर्टेंट हैं यूपीएससी में, विच आर लाइक इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी, गवर्नेंस, टॉपिक्स लाइक एथिक्स इन गवर्नेंस, सोसाइटी, दीज आर इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक्स. दे आर मेक और ब्रेक इन योर मेंस अटेम्प्ट. उसके ऊपर अगर आप ध्यान नहीं देंगे तो देन यू विल लूज आउट मार्क्स इन मेंस एग्जाम. So it does take time. You have to be patient with respect to preparation of the examination is what I want to convey here. Now, once that is done, then I need to go and revise, practice, revise, and then I need to doing this again and again. How many revisions? There is no fixed number. And let me tell you, this exam is like that, जितनी भी आप रिविजन कर लेंगे कम ही लगेगा. अगर आप 5 बार भी पढ़ लेंगे पॉलिटी के सब्जेक्ट को, तब भी लगेगा कि कोई चीज तो कहीं ना कहीं मिस हो गई है, which is the nature of this examination. So it is okay. Do not try to achieve perfectionism in this exam. There will always be certain gaps. I can tell you this by guarantee. Even our students, those who have secured rank 1 in the past, they were also not absolutely 100% sure while walking into the examination hall कि मेरा selection हो ही जाएगा. नहीं होता, किसी को भी इसके ऊपर गारंटी नहीं होती है. तो हमेशा एक uncertainty का element will be there with this examination because of the nature of the examination. But it is okay. Why? Because please remember, you're not the only one who is sailing in that boat. इस बार के प्रीलिम्स एग्जामिनेशन के बारे में मेरा यही मानना है कि जिस कैंडिडेट को अपनी तैयारी पे भरोसा था, वो जब एग्जाम में पेपर देखा होगा तो उसको पता चला होगा कि यार ये तो मुश्किल पेपर है, सो आई नीड टू बी कंजर्वेटिव विद माई अटेम्प्ट्स. अगर मुझसे नहीं हो रहा है तो किसी और से भी नहीं हो रहा होगा. लेट मी बी वेरी केयरफुल विद अटेम्प्टिंग क्वेश्चंस. अगर उस पेपर में मैं 90 क्वेश्चंस करने की कोशिश करूंगा तो ऑफकोर्स मेरे इतने नेगेटिव हो जाएंगे कि मेरा स्कोर जो है 70 के नीचे गिर जाएगा. कट ऑफ जाएगी लोअर साइड पे. एग्जैक्टली क्या जाएगी ये नहीं कोई कह सकता, बट इट विल बी ऑन द लोअर साइड. इट विल नॉट बी इन द 90s फॉर श्योर. इट विल बी इन द लोअर साइड. सो इफ इट इज गोइंग टू बी ऑन द लोअर साइड, इंटेलिजेंस सजेस्ट दैट अगर मुझे अपनी तैयारी पे भरोसा है, मुझे पता है कि यार किसी और से भी नहीं हो रहा होगा, तो इट इज ओके. आई डोंट नीड टू गेट एंशियस इन द एग्जामिनेशन हॉल. ये मेंस में भी होता है, प्लीज रिमेंबर. मेंस में बहुत साल पेपर 1, 2, 3, 4 में, स्पेशली 1, 2 and 3 में वो 1-2 बिल्कुल बाउंसर क्वेश्चंस डालता है. बिल्कुल बाउंसर, एकदम ऐसे बाउंसर कि कोई नहीं अटेम्प्ट कर सकता उसको. बट यू शुड हैव द अंडरस्टैंडिंग कि यार ये मैंने इतनी पढ़ाई करी, उसके बाद भी ये क्वेश्चन पता नहीं क्या पूछा है. इफ आई एम नॉट एबल टू आंसर, कोई और भी नहीं कर पाएगा. देयर आर 2 ऑप्शंस दैट आर देयर इन फ्रंट ऑफ यू एट दैट टाइम. या तो आप उसमें कुछ भी रैंडम लिखना शुरू कर दीजिएगा उस क्वेश्चन के अंदर, and that will not fetch you any marks because UPSC examiner is very ruthless. He will give you only 0 marks for writing some random content in the answers. The second approach is I leave that question. नहीं कुछ बिल्कुल ही नहीं पता है तो छोड़ दो उसको. जो वो टाइम बचेगा मेरा 8 या 10 मिनट, let me use that across questions. Let me use that in 6 other questions, giving 1 more minute to each and every question to improve my content, to improve my structure, to maybe make a diagram, to give more examples, to write more better content in the answers of those questions. Because in those 6 questions, if I can secure half a mark extra or 1 mark extra, I will be plus 6. In this question, if I end up wasting my 10 minutes, I will get 0. So that's the intelligence that you people need to have. Now why is that important? Now some people will say कि अरे ये सब justify मत करो UPSC को. But the thing is that you see, ultimately when you people will be in civil services, you will be working in constrained resources. India कोई अमीर देश तो है नहीं जहाँ पे आपके पास infinite resources होंगे डिस्ट्रिक्ट में या डिपार्टमेंट के अंदर. Limited number of resources, a large number of mouths to feed, large number of people to serve. You have to prioritize. And UPSC is testing those prioritization skills, not just in mains but in prelims as well. तो वो priority करना जरूरी है. Same interview में होता है. A lot of times what happens is candidates when they are asked questions in interview, they tend to give answers as if they are giving GS answer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 without any prioritization order. एग्जामिनर या यूपीएससी आपकी नॉलेज ऑलरेडी देख चुका है. वो अब आपको सामने से परखना चाहता है. दे वांट टू जज यू वेदर यू कैन प्रायोरिटाइज योर सोल्यूशन. क्योंकि आप सारी चीजें तो एक साथ नहीं कर सकते. विच इज द वन विच विल बी फर्स्ट थिंग दैट यू विल डू, वो देखना चाह रहा है वहां पे इंटरव्यूअर. विच इज दैट द प्रायोरिटी ऑर्डर दैट यू विल गिव टू वेरियस सोल्यूशंस. सो दैट मीन्स दैट आई नीड टू डेवलप दैट एबिलिटी एज वेल. एंड दैट ऑल्सो can come with practice. That also can come with observation of previous year topper copies, trying to understand the questions, trying to understand what my priority order will be. But it takes time. You cannot expect it to happen in one day. Okay, so this is the strategy that I would have. Now the other thing is, students का कुछ ऐसा हाल हो जाता है कि पहले prelims की तैयारी करें या mains की तैयारी करें, and I feel that this is a very big problem. Many people have ended up spreading this myth that prelims and mains preparation needs to be done separately. That is not how it is supposed to be done. your preparation for any topic needs to be done in a very integrated manner. एक integrated तरीके से मुझे prelims और mains की तैयारी करनी है. कैसे? Let me explain to you, so that you do not end up in this kind of a situation that where you don't know whether to give priority to mains or prelims. I'm sure that many of you already know about this topic, so it may be a repetition for some of you, but I'm just trying to explain कि कैसे approach करना है. So let's talk about the topic of ordinance making powers of the president or the governors. बहुत डिटेल में नहीं डिस्कस करूंगा, बट आई विल टेल यू दैट हाउ आई नीड टू प्रिपेयर द टॉपिक. एक किसी भी टॉपिक को प्रिपेयर करने की मेरी किस तरीके की अप्रोच, किस तरीके की डेप्थ होनी चाहिए. So ordinance making powers of the president or the governor is the topic that I have in front of me. Now, firstly, I need to know the basics around this topic. That firstly, for example, in which article of the Indian Constitution is the ordinance making powers of the president or the governor mentioned? So I need to know कि article 123 and 213 of the Constitution, and उसमें मेरे को chapter part भी पता होना चाहिए. That it has been mentioned in chapter 4 of chapter 3 of part 5 of the Constitution. Okay, so that's where this ordinance making powers have been mentioned. Secondly, I need to know what exactly are these powers, but उससे पहले भी मुझे ये समझना जरूरी है what is the philosophical basis. So this is the what part of it. Okay, where and what is this particular article mentioned. Second is why. Why do I need ordinance making powers? जब भी, जो मैंने अभी थोड़ी देर पहले बोला था, कोई भी लॉ, कोई भी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोविजन लिखा गया है वो किसी प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व करने के लिए लिखा गया है. नाउ as we all know, any law in India can be made by the parliament only if both the houses of the parliament give assent to that law, and then it is given assent by the president of India. That's when a bill becomes an act, which means that if either of the houses of the parliament is not in session, a bill cannot become an act. I want a legislation to be made. अगर कोई भी एक हाउस सेशन में नहीं है तो वो लॉ नहीं बन सकता. Now imagine that there is an urgent situation that has occurred in the country. So there is urgency. I need to take urgent action. I need to enact an urgent law to deal with any problem. It could be to deal with the problem of terrorism, it could be to deal with the problem of climate change, it could be to deal with the problem of cyber security, whatever. I need an urgent action to be taken to make a law. But the problem is that either one or both the houses of the parliament are not in session. Now, if both the houses of the parliament were to be called in session, the president of India, when they will issue the summon, it's not that the parliamentarians will be just waiting for the president to issue the summon and they'll be waiting right outside the door of the parliament and they will enter the parliament. They must be somewhere in different constituencies, they may be traveling the world for different reasons, they may have their ministerial duties or whatever. So this entire process of the parliament to assemble may take some days. So it may happen that urgent action चाहिए, but parliament की assembly के लिए it will take, let's say, 2 weeks. तो अर्जेंटली लॉ तो नहीं बना पाऊंगा मैं. अब मैं इसको अगर मिनिमम टू मिनिमम 4 दिन 5 दिन भी मान लेता हूं, तब भी मैं अर्जेंटली लॉ तो नहीं बना पाऊंगा. सेकेंड थिंग इज दैट नाउ व्हेन द पार्लियामेंट, even if it comes into session after 2 weeks, it's not that the law will be passed the same day when it is introduced in the house. There will be some discussion, debate that will take place on that bill, and there will be a lot of deliberation. At times this deliberation can last for months. At times this deliberation can last for a few minutes, but let's assume that this deliberation or this discussion on the bill also is going to be there for, say, 2 weeks or 1 week period. So almost 3 weeks will pass by the time the parliament will give the approval and the bill will go to the president for approval. What if I need something very urgently? It will be too late. What if there are riots that are spreading in country, and in order to control them I need to give certain special powers to the police in India? I cannot wait for the parliament to come into session and by that time the entire country would be under a havoc. I cannot expect to do that. So in order to deal with some urgent action or to take an urgent action or urgent law that has to be made, especially when both the houses of the parliament is not in session, the Constitution of India has given law making powers to the executive as well. Normally we know that the function of the executive is to execute the laws, not to make the laws. But in such a situation, the executive will also have the powers to make the law as well. And this is what is called as ordinance. So this is an extraordinary measure that has been given to the executive in India in order to make a law on an urgent basis. When national security may be at threat, when public order may be at threat, when both the houses of the parliament are not in session or either houses is not in session, and we need to take some immediate action. So that's the basis of this ordinance making power. But now what is happening by these ordinance making powers is that I am violating a very important principle of our constitution, which we know as separation of powers, which is that executive, judiciary and legislature should be having separate domain of functioning. Here I am diluting the principle of separation of powers. Now we all know that if I concentrate too much powers in the hands of one organ of the state, then there will always be possibility of misuse of power. So therefore I need to create some system where when the parliament, when the executive is exercising their ordinance making powers, there is some check that is imposed on their power. So now I need to also understand that how the constitution or the ordinance making powers. So now I will get into the how part. The how part will be that how this ordinance making powers, I am just writing in short, violate the principle of separation of powers. And since they violate or dilute the principle of separation of powers, our constitution makers must have thought of a remedy as well to address this problem also. तो इसको address करने के लिए भी एक तरीका बनाया होगा. तो there must be some kind of checks and balances that must be present in our constitution, which would help in preventing the misuse of the ordinance making power. So now I need to know the checks and balances. So one check and balance is that once the ordinance has been enacted or once it has been promulgated, then after that it must get approval of both the houses of the parliament within 6 weeks of their reassembly. But अब इसमें कुछ nitty-gritties पता होनी चाहिए मुझे. That when will the 6 weeks period be counted from if both the houses are assembling at different dates? To understand all of these things, I must refer the bare act of the constitution. Explanation that has been provided in article 123 clearly says that if both the houses of the parliament are assembling on a different date, then the 6 weeks period will be counted from the date of the assembly of the second house of the parliament. So I have basically put a check and balance that there is a time duration. There is a time limit for which the ordinance can stay in power. So that is one. Modalities वगैरह नहीं लिख रहा हूँ मैं. 6 weeks from the date of reassembly of both the houses of the parliament. The second is that the ordinance can also be revoked at any time by the executive. अगर executive चाहे तो किसी भी समय पे ordinance को वापस revoke भी कर सकता है. Third is that ultimately ordinance is going to have the same effect as law of the parliament or law of the state legislature, which means that whatever limitations that are imposed on the law of the parliament or law of state legislature must also apply on an ordinance, because it's a parallel legislative power of the executive, which means that if a law made by the parliament or legislature cannot violate fundamental rights, even an ordinance cannot violate fundamental rights, and this has been explicitly mentioned as well in article 13 of the constitution. So I need to know that it cannot say violate fundamental rights. There is another thing. Parliament cannot enact a law on a subject which is mentioned in the state list. State cannot enact a law on the subject which is mentioned in the union list. Ordinance also is subject to same limitation, which means that an ordinance that is promulgated by the president cannot be promulgated on the subjects mentioned in state list. So there is a issue of legislative competence as well, which basically means that an ordinance promulgated by the union cannot be promulgated on a subject that is mentioned in the competence, right? Cannot be made on a subject that is mentioned in the state list, competence. Okay, so yes, see anyway. So now I have this, these are some of the limitations which have been put in the constitution. Plus, I know that any law that is made by the parliament is subject to judicial review. The courts have said that even ordinances are subject to judicial review of the courts, just like any other law of the parliament. So which means that now I need to know that what is the aspect of judicial review with respect to the ordinance making powers of the president governor. तो अब मेरे को ये कुछ checks and balances पता चल गए, मेरे को rationale भी पता चल गया, basis, philosophical basis पता चल गया of why ordinance making powers are required. I have understood how we keep a check on the ordinance making powers of the executive in India via the various constitutional mechanisms. Plus कुछ और conventions भी evolve हुई हैं इंडिया में. The convention is that because you are exercising the power of the parliament, when you will place the ordinance in front of the legislature for their approval, you must accompany it along with a statement which will tell what are the reasons because of which you went through ordinance route and you did not wait for a few days for the parliament to reassemble and to pass that law through the legislative route. So एक convention India में जो evolve किया है checks and balances के respect में, which is that any such ordinance must be accompanied along with statement of reasons and objects when it is tabled in front of the parliament, so that the executive can be held accountable by the parliament when they are exercising the powers that are actually originally given to the parliament under the Indian constitution. एक दो और भी checks है, मतलब ये भी check है that if both the houses of the parliament pass a resolution disapproving the ordinance any time before the expiry of 6 weeks period, then the ordinance would also go out of effect. So these are checks and balances which are there in place. Now, once I've understood this, Constitution of India is not absolutely clear at all the places. There is some ambiguity as well in different places. Law hai, interpretation can be different. So therefore, there are interpretations that have been provided by the judgments of the Supreme Court as well. Now, the interpretation that has been given by the court with respect to ordinance making powers is, ab ye question utha, what if an ordinance is promulgated by the executive today and before the expiry of the 6 weeks period, suppose कीजिएगा, I'll give you a very simple example quickly. Let's say the ordinance was enacted on was promulgated on 12th of June 2026. That's the day of promulgation of ordinance by the executive. Parliament is not in session at this point of time. Now Parliament will come into session, let's say on 18th of June. Okay, 18th of June 2026. So I will count 6 weeks period from here, that the expiry of the ordinance will take place from 6 weeks from here, which is roughly, I can say, somewhere around, what would it be? 2nd of August ho jayega, something like that. 6 weeks from here will be like 2nd of August. So 2nd of August, this ordinance is going to go out of effect. Now what happens is, 1st of August, the 2nd of August, the ordinance is supposed to lapse. 1st of August, what happens is, the President of India issues an order for prorogation of Parliament session. They end the session of the Parliament on 1st of June, a day before the expiry of 1st of August, a day before the expiry of this particular ordinance. And then prorogation हो गया, मैंने ordinance withdraw किया और मैंने वापस से वही same ordinance, same text के साथ फिर से repromulgate कर दिया. So now the question that arises is that is repromulgation of an ordinance possible or not? Is that something which can be done or not? Now Constitution of India is not really putting a limitation on the powers of the executive to repromulgate an ordinance. It may or may not be done by the executive depending upon what is the interpretation that is given by the court. Now I need to know that in 1960s a very peculiar situation happened in Bihar. There was a professor of economics who was doing some research on the land reform laws in Bihar. His name was Professor D.C. Badwa. Now Professor D.C. Badwa, and see again, why am I telling you all these stories? Because please remember, human mind is designed to learn stories. Human mind is not designed to learn random and isolated facts. Isolated fact मैं आपके ऊपर फेंकूंगा, आप कभी याद नहीं रखेंगे, पर अगर मैं स्टोरी फॉर्म में किसी भी कॉन्सेप्ट को पढ़ूंगा, I'll be able to retain it forever. तो अब DC Badwa जो थे, he was an economics professor. He was doing some research on the land reform laws in Bihar, and he observed while doing his research that between 1967 to 1981 in Bihar, the governor had promulgated roughly 256 ordinances. And out of these 256 ordinances, almost 69 ordinances were repromulgated not just once, but multiple times. Not just that, but some of these ordinances were kept alive for almost 14 years, more than a decade. अब ये बताइए, क्या कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन मेकर्स की इंटेंशन ये थी कि हम ऑर्डिनेंस को इनफाइनाइटली कंटिन्यू कर सकते हैं? नहीं. कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोरालिटी वी ऑल नो is like what is the basis on which the constitutional principles have been written, and of course, when the constitution makers would have been writing down the ordinance making powers, they would not have expected that it would be misused by the executive in such a manner that they will keep repromulgating the ordinance by doing this kind of a fraud and keep it alive for 14 years. So he challenges it in front of the Supreme Court, and then I need to know that the case was basically DC Vadhava versus State of Bihar. Now in this case, the court says that if ordinance is repromulgated with the intention of escaping the scrutiny of the legislature, then it would be a fraud on the constitution. Now this is very important, please pay attention to what I am saying. The court in this case is saying that an ordinance repromulgated for escaping the scrutiny of the legislature shall be unconstitutional, because the intention of the constitution makers was not to make ordinance making powers permanent or make an ordinance permanent feature. Then what is the point of the parliament or the legislature? So it cannot be for escaping the scrutiny of the legislature. But the court is saying that, so basically court is saying, अगर आप इस intention के साथ promulgate करते हो, repromulgate करते हो कि legislature के सामने कभी ordinance जाए ही नहीं, so then it's a challenge. Then it can be challenged in the court and we can declare the exercise of promulgation of ordinances unconstitutional. But in this judgment, the court also says that there can be some justification for repromulgation of an ordinance. So court in its judgment also says there are certain situations in which it will be justified to repromulgate an ordinance. What are the situations in which it will be justified to repromulgate ordinance? One, if the ordinance has been repromulgated because the session of the legislature was too short, and because of that they were not able to take up that ordinance for discussion. Or the second was that, or the legislature was overburdened with work. They were so overburdened with work that they were not able to take up that particular ordinance for discussion. So अगर ऐसा कोई केस होता है तो then repromulgation as an exercise would be justified. Now, in a way, this is a welcome judgment of the court, because the court is trying to find a balance between the powers of the executive and the powers of the court. But what this has done is that it has left a window open for the executive to deliberately keep the session of the legislature very short, because we know that the duration of the legislature of the session of the legislature is decided by the executive. वो जानबूझ के 5 दिन का सेशन बुलाएंगे क्योंकि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में ये तो नहीं लिखा है कि सेशन का ड्यूरेशन कितना होना चाहिए. This is a decision taken by the Council of Ministers. Basically, President or the Governor takes that on the advice of Council of Ministers. So, मैं जानबूझ के एक छोटा सेशन बुलाऊंगा and then I will claim that we were not able to take up this particular ordinance for discussion and as a result हमें repromulgate करना पड़ा. So what has happened as a result of this particular judgment of the court is, judgment of the court was well intentioned. They are trying to create a balance between executive and judiciary, but the way it has been used is a problem. That the executive has continued to misuse this judgment into their favor by repromulgating ordinance multiple number of times. So मेरे को कुछ recent examples पता होने चाहिए. Land Acquisition Act was promulgated through the ordinance route, or for that matter the SEBI amendment ordinance, and some recent, for example, you see the recent ordinance itself to increase the strength of the judges of the Supreme Court. Now see, this is something which is very worrisome. You are increasing the strength of the judges of the Supreme Court. इतने साल से प्रॉब्लम थी ना, तो इतने साल 34 ही स्ट्रेंथ थी, बीच में इतने सेशंस आए पार्लियामेंट के, तब आपने बिल नहीं इंट्रोड्यूस किया. आज आप बिल आपने ऑर्डिनेंस के रूट के थ्रू उसका साइज बढ़ा दिया. Such an important decision which is going to have an impact on the functioning of the judiciary in the country has been taken via ordinance route and not via deliberative route. Please remember, ordinance is made. Danger क्या है ordinance के साथ? It is going to, so now once I know all of these, I also need to know what are the concerns with ordinance making powers. तो एक और चीज मेरे को इसमें प्रिपेयर करनी है, which is what are the concerns with ordinance making powers. What are they? First, they go against the principle of separation of powers, right? Second, that there is always a possibility of repromulgation of an ordinance by the executive multiple number of times, especially by misusing the judgment that has been given by the Honorable Supreme Court of India. The third is that ordinance may be made on a matter which is a very controversial topic to avoid discussion and deliberation in the parliament. Now see, normally when a parliamentary law is passed, there is discussion, opposition is there, the members of the executive are there, the debates of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha are being televised live. So people have also a watch on what is happening. यहाँ पे तो क्यों किसी लॉ के अंदर आपने स्ट्रेंथ 34 से 38 ही क्यों करी, 50 क्यों नहीं करी? Is there any justification? No. I do not know the justification. I do not know the reasons. So the problem is that this basically creates a probability for misuse of powers, because there is always going to be lesser discussion on an ordinance as compared to the legislative route, right? So lesser deliberation, and if there is no deliberation, discussion, there is no arguments that are being made on the other side, then it means that I am going my way or the highway. So ordinance is my way or the highway kind of a route. It should be used only as a temporary measure. Now I know all of this knowledge. I should also know this. Another thing that I should ask myself is that then क्या हम ordinance making power को हटा दें? नहीं, because there was a reason because of which the constitution makers had given these powers to the executive in India. The problem is not with the law or the constitution. The problem is the way it has been used by the executive or the legislature in India. So it should not be repealed. So we should have certain checks and balances. The legislature should keep a strong check on, close check on the ordinance that have been promulgated by the executive. The executive should also refrain from promulgating ordinances, especially when they know that the law can be passed via legislative route. So once I have all this knowledge, now let me see what are the questions that have been asked. अब इस तरीके से मुझे इस तरीके की डिटेल से मुझे एक टॉपिक पढ़ना है. Of course, I have covered this topic in very what do I say, in a fast and a brief manner right now. When we are discussing in the foundation classes, as you have seen, थोड़ा सा और हम इसके ऊपर समय देते हैं. We discuss some of the concepts multiple times and slowly. Now once that is done, now let me go and refer the questions. और मेरे को पहले ही actually questions refer कर लेने थे. Question था 2025 का. अब देखिए प्रीलिम्स और मेंस के क्वेश्चन में फर्क देखिए. An ordinance can amend any central act. Can it amend any central act? Yes, it can. Can an ordinance amend an existing law of the parliament? Yes, of course it can, because it has the same power as the law of the parliament, so it can amend any central act. Second, an ordinance can abridge a fundamental right. Of course, this statement is wrong, because an ordinance is also called as law according to the provisions of Article 13 Clause 2, and therefore cannot violate fundamental rights. By the first principles thinking as well, ordinance is same as the law of the parliament, so it cannot be violating the fundamental rights, just like a law of the parliament cannot violate the fundamental rights. Then an ordinance can come into effect from a back date. Can a law in India come into effect from back date, retrospective effect? Yes, except if it is a criminal law, right? So we know that it is possible in case of an ordinance as well. So therefore the answer to this will be 1 and 3. Now in this question, therefore, the what is more important. Now the why and the how comes in case of a mains question. This is the question that was asked by UPSC in 2015 mains. Resorting to ordinances has always raised concerns on violation of spirit of separation of powers doctrine. So there has always been a concern that has been raised with the use of ordinance making powers by the executive with respect to violation or dilution of principle of separation of powers, while noting the rationale. So now I have to notice what all the examiner is asking me. एक तो examiner मुझको चाह रहा है कि मैं कहीं ना कहीं अपने आंसर में बोलूं कि ऑर्डिनेंस मेकिंग पावर से स्पिरिट ऑफ सेपरेशन ऑफ पावर्स कैसे वायलेट होती है या इसको डाइल्यूट किया जाता है. सो दिस कैन बिकम अ पार्ट ऑफ माय इंट्रोडक्शन इटसेल्फ. The meat of the question is, while noting the rationale, justifying the power to promulgate ordinance. So what is the rationale? What is the reason, philosophical basis that we discussed for promulgating ordinance? Analyze whether decisions of the Supreme Court have on this issue have further facilitated resorting to this power. So you will say that, see, Supreme Court has said that ordinance making power can be subject to judicial review. Repromulgation cannot be done with the intention of bypassing the legislature. But even though this was a well-intentioned judgment of the court, but there are certain gaps which have been created, and that's what I will be discussing in the answer जो अभी हमने discuss किया. And then it says, should the power to promulgate ordinances be repealed? So there are actually 3 parts of the question. One is, what is the justification for the ordinance making powers? Introduction में मैं वही separation of powers cover कर लूँगा. Second is, whether decision of the Supreme Court has resorted to the executive using more of the ordinance making powers in India. And the third part of the question is that should this power to promulgate ordinances be repealed? 3 parts of the question that have been given to me clearly by the examiner. Now I have to answer each of these 3 parts. Now what would my answer look like? Let me tell you what the answer to this kind of a question would look like. मैं पूरा answer नहीं बता रहा हूँ, but I'm just telling you how the answer would look like. So you can begin with, and see, everyone can have a different approach to write the answer to this question, but those basic 4 things need to be covered somehow or the other. So if I was in your place, I will simply start by saying that our constitution relies upon the principle of separation of powers, where executive, legislature and judiciary have their separate domain of functioning. But ordinance making powers under Article 123 and 213 are diluting this principle by giving the law making powers to the executive. तो मैं separation of powers कैसे violate हो रहा है as a result of the ordinance making powers, I will mention that in my introduction itself. And I will also mention where the ordinance making power has been mentioned in the constitution in Article 123 and 213 etc. Then I will say that what is the rationale. So मैं heading दूंगा अपने answer में, justification for ordinances or for ordinance making power. So I will write 1 or 2 points, whatever we discussed. Once I am done with that, the third, again see, it need not necessarily be in point format. Your answer can be in paragraph format, but still having the point method. Basically हर paragraph जो है वो point की तरह लिखा हुआ है, वैसे भी कर सकते हैं, और otherwise I can write points as well. In GS I have that liberty that is available to me, probably not in the optional examination. So once I have written what is the justification for the ordinance making powers, after that I will go and I will tell what is the judgment of the Supreme Court on this matter. So I will mention about, when we read about the ordinance making powers, we read about A.K. Roy versus Union of India और R.C. Cooper versus Union of India. दोनों ही cases के अंदर कोर्ट ने बोला था that the ordinance making powers are subject to judicial review of the courts in the country. Second is, I will give a reference of D.C. Wadhwa case as well. I don't need to explain the entire details, but I need to tell the examiner that in D.C. Wadhwa case, the court has said that repromulgation of an ordinance is a fraud on the constitution if it is done to bypass the scrutiny of the legislature, but in certain cases it would be justified. Once I have done that, now I have to analyze the judgment of the Supreme Court. So I can give another heading, that analysis of Supreme Court judgment, another subheading, and then I will tell that even though it was a उसमें भी मैं सब points लिख सकता हूँ 1, 2, 3, that it was a well-intentioned judgment of the court. It was to create balance between executive and legislature, but it has executive and judiciary, but it has been misused by the executive to its advantage. How? I will explain that. Once I have mentioned all of that, and therefore I will say that it has created, और फिर मैं कुछ examples भी दूंगा. See, anything that I am saying must be substantiated as well. So how I have seen in the recent past, the number of ordinances that are being promulgated by the executive increased. ये data मुझे कहाँ से मिलेगा? Answers से, newspaper से, current affairs से. And then finally, I would talk about whether should, ऐसा लिख सकता हूँ मैं, should ordinance power be repealed. क्या इस पावर को रिपील करने की जरूरत है? और फिर मैं उसके अंदर arguments for, arguments against लिखूंगा, because it's a constitutional provision that I'm talking about, and various committees of the government have also stated that there is no need to repeal this power. I will end up giving the suggestion that there is no need to repeal the power, but we need to have stronger checks and balances, and there only उसी के साथ मैं connect करके अपना conclusion लिख दूंगा. I don't need to write a separate heading of conclusion. I don't need to specifically write way forward as well separately as a subheading. I can just write the conclusion that, as seen above, ordinance making power is important, but there should be certain checks and balances. The executive should refrain from using ordinance in all the issues, especially important constitutional issues. Secondly, the legislature also needs to keep a tighter check on the ordinances that are promulgated, to have more discussion on the ordinances when they are presented in front of the parliament. So now you see the approach that differs in mains and prelims. अब अगर मुझे देखिए basic concept नहीं पता है, I cannot say that my preparation of prelims is separated from mains. It has to be all encompassing, comprehensive preparation has to be there, and that's why it's important to give time. It's important to build the foundation really strong, and once you are there, then believe me, nothing can stop you in the exam. उसके बाद बस बचता है आंसर राइटिंग प्रैक्टिस. अब देखिए, जैसे मैंने यहाँ पे ये किया, इसके अंदर ही थोड़ा सा और मैं अगर डिटेल्स भर दूं, I need to practice writing answers to several questions like this also. हर बार मैं पूरे आंसर्स नहीं लिख पाऊंगा. पहले मुझे स्टार्टिंग में अपना फ्रेमवर्क बनाना चाहिए सारे क्वेश्चंस के लिए. ऐसा जब ये मैं 50, 100, 200 क्वेश्चंस के लिए कर लूं, then I should, on the basis of this framework, start writing the answers. This way, I will develop an habit of looking at the question and breaking it into parts and then thinking that क्या क्या चीजें मेरे आंसर में आनी चाहिए. Initially, when I will do this for 100, 200 questions, I will do this on piece of paper like this. But later on, when I would have gained expertise in this after multiple practice attempts, then I would be able to think of the question in my mind within 1 minute when the question comes in front of me. पूरा blueprint मेरे दिमाग में ready हो जाएगा और मैं उसको पेपर के अंदर छाप दूंगा. Please remember that you will not have a lot of time to do this rough work in the exam, then write the main answer. वो सब का time नहीं होगा आपके पास mains exam में. तभी you must have seen that successful candidates keep saying that you need to be very well prepared for mains. You need to literally have practiced answers. जब तक आप इसको practice नहीं करेंगे ना, ऐसे 100, 200, 300 questions practice नहीं करेंगे इस तरीके से, और फिर उनके answers लिखने की practice नहीं करेंगे, you will not be able to get command over the concepts. And initially this will seem tough, I can tell you that, for everyone, even for the best of the candidates. जिनका selection होता भी है, उनको भी initially दिक्कत आती है, आपको भी आएगी, but इसको घबराने की बात नहीं है. It is important that you be perseverant and you are consistent in your approach. Okay? So that's what is the approach that we need to take up. Similarly, again, I mean, we do not have so much time कि मैं अब एक-एक topic ऐसे cover करूँ, but let's see, there is one other topic. Constitution of India is a living instrument with capabilities of enormous dynamism. ये article 21 पे UPSC mains में question पूछ रही है. Constitution of India is not static. It is a growing constitution. It's a dynamic constitution. It is a constitution made for a progressive society. Illustrate with special reference to the expanding horizons of right to life and personal liberty. So how right to life and personal liberty has been expanded according to the requirements of the society in India is what I have to explain in this answer. I cannot simply write article 21 is this is what the judgments of the court are and how article 21 has been expanded. No. There are certain requirements that are coming up in the society and our constitution is adjusting to those requirements. Back in the day, health and nutrition would not have been a very significant aspect of the governance or government's duties. But today, people are demanding this. So society is demanding the government to provide better healthcare and nutrition to its citizens. So in order to ensure that this right to health and nutrition is actually recognized in an effective manner, the courts in India have expanded the meaning of Article 21 to include right to life and right to health and nutrition as well as a part of Article 21. Similarly, डायनेमिक सोसाइटी है, डायनेमिक प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, तो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को भी डायनेमिकली इवॉल्व करना पड़ेगा. सो बैक इन द डे देयर वाज नो प्रॉब्लम ऑफ प्रिवेसी और वायलेशन ऑफ प्रिवेसी, सबके ऊपर कोई कंसर्न नहीं था. बट टुडे विद द इंक्रीजिंग यूज ऑफ एआई, इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी, साइबर टेक्नोलॉजी एक्सेट्रा, there is a lot of intrusion that is being made into the personal lives and the personal data of the individuals, personal information of the citizens. So now we need the constitution to evolve according to the requirement of the society, where privacy has become a very important concept in modern day society. So Supreme Court has recognized right to privacy as a part of fundamental right under Article 21 in the Puttaswamy judgment. तो मुझे ऐसे relate करके लिखना है. अगर मैं simply बस content dump कर दूंगा examiner के ऊपर, I will not get marks. I have to understand the gist of the question. उसका जो अगर मैंने basic सार एक बार grasp कर लिया, you understand सार, what I'm trying to say is the basic gist of the question. Then after that things will become easier. But I am able to do this because I have worked on my comprehension skills. I read and I have developed my comprehension skills. You can also reach there. कि question देखते ही समझ में आ गया कि अच्छा इसके अंदर ये चीजें आएंगी. That's how toppers are doing. And I'm going to be discussing this also, that what are the common mistakes that you need to avoid, and one of them is thinking that Lakshmikant पढ़ ली तो सब हो गया. Lakshmikant is the base. It is not the ceiling. Many candidates treat Lakshmikant as the base and the ceiling both. उनको लगता है यही पढ़ लिया बस हो गया. आप चाहे लक्ष्मीकांत पढ़ें, डीडी बसु पढ़ें, या जाके एमपी जैन पढ़ें, कोई भी एडवांस टेक्स्ट भी पढ़ लें, अगर आपको क्वेश्चन का आंसर लिखना नहीं आता है, वो सारी नॉलेज बेकार है. तो क्वेश्चन ये है ही नहीं कि किताब कौन सी पढ़नी है. क्वेश्चन ये है कि उस किताब से मैंने कितना सीखा एंड हाउ एम आई एबल टू राइट द आंसर्स टू द क्वेश्चंस इन द एग्जाम. वो है चैलेंज. अब प्रीलिम्स एग्जाम में वो कैसे पूछ रहा है, देखो क्वेश्चन. विच ऑफ द फॉलोइंग सेफगार्ड्स वंस राइट टू मैरी अ पर्सन ऑफ देयर चॉइस. सो अगेन दिस इज अगेन व्हाट पे आ रहा है, देख रहे हैं आप. एंड दैट वन इज मोर अबाउट व्हाई, हाउ, एंड दिस इज मोर अबाउट व्हाट. But please do remember, now UPSC is blurring these lines between mains and prelims as well. If you've seen the paper this year, they're trying to blur those lines. Now you can't blame UPSC कि अरे ऐसा क्या पूछ रहे, उसकी मर्जी है, देखिए वो जैसा पूछेगा. I always tell this to candidates. I understand कि जिन्होंने इस बार एग्जाम दिया होगा, हो सकता है some of you may have got shocked in the exam, many of you may not have done well, and my commiserations with you. I understand. अगर मैं भी शायद उस पोजीशन में होता तो शायद मैं भी घबरा जाता. बट अब हमारे पास दो रास्ते हैं. एक ये है कि हम यूपीएससी को ब्लेम करें, जाके धरना दें और उससे कुछ नहीं होगा. दूसरा ये है दैट वी अंडरस्टैंड दैट दोस्त यही एग्जाम है, आई हैव टू फाइंड अ वे अराउंड दिस एंड मुझे इसी एग्जाम को क्वालिफाई करना है किसी तरीके से. मेरा ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या है? मेरा ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या क्रांतिकारी बन के सड़क के ऊपर उतर के यूपीएससी को अब्यूज करना है, या मेरा ऑब्जेक्टिव एग्जाम क्वालिफाई करना है? ये आपको खुद डिसाइड करना है. अगर आपको लगता है कि नहीं ये तो बहुत रैंडम है, जैसे लोग कह रहे थे अबसर्ड है, तो देन यू से दैट भाई ये तो अबसर्ड अनसाइंटिफिक एग्जाम है, मैं नहीं दूंगा इस एग्जाम को, मत दीजिए. लॉट ऑफ पीपल डू दैट एंड दे डू वेरी वेल इन लाइफ. दैट्स अगेन अ चॉइस दैट यू नीड टू मेक. बट एग्जाम भी देते रहेंगे और एग्जाम के ऊपर सल्क भी करेंगे तो नहीं होगा कुछ. इट्स ईदर दिस और दैट दैट यू हैव टू चूज. सो आई कंप्लीटली अंडरस्टैंड दैट द पेपर मे हैव थ्रोन अ लॉट ऑफ बाउंसर्स दिस ईयर. मेंस में भी ऐसा होता है, बट आई कांट ब्लेम द एग्जाम इटसेल्फ ना. अब क्या कर सकते हैं, मेरे को तो उस एग्जाम को ओवर पावर करके क्वालिफाई करना है. दैट इज वॉट माई ऑब्जेक्टिव शुड बी, नॉट ब्लेमिंग द सिस्टम और ब्लेमिंग द एग्जाम और ब्लेमिंग द इंस्टीट्यूशन दैट इज कंडक्टिंग द एग्जाम. वो हमारे हाथ में वैसे भी नहीं है ना. आपके ट्विटर पे या सोशल मीडिया पे हल्ला मचाने से कुछ नहीं होगा. यूपीएससी इज अ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल बॉडी, वो वही करेगी जो उसको करना होगा. एंड लेट मी टेल यू, योर फीडबैक डज रीच यूपीएससी, बट द थिंग इज दैट यू डोंट नो हाउ यूपीएससी विल रिएक्ट टू दैट फीडबैक. नेक्स्ट ईयर हो सकता है वो और डिफिकल्ट पेपर बना दे, वो बोल दे ले और ले. यू डोंट नो. इट्स यू हैव टू डिसाइड. आई ऑलवेज गिव दिस एग्जांपल ऑफ आईपीएल में पहले 180 रन बनते थे तो उस पर टीम जीत जाती थी. अब 250 रन बन के भी नहीं जीत रहे हैं. तो क्या बॉलर्स ने बॉल डालना छोड़ दिया ये बोल के कि यार ये तो 15 साल का बच्चा आके इतने छक्के मार रहा है? आप सोचिए, समवन लाइक जसप्रीत बुमराह, हु इज नंबर 1 बॉलर इन द वर्ल्ड, ही इज गेटिंग टोंग्ड फॉर सिक्सेस बाय अ 15-year-old boy. Whatever his age may be, 15 or 16 or 17, I don't care. But the point is, a young boy with no experience of playing such competitive cricket earlier is coming and talking the best bowler in the world. क्या जसप्रीत बुमराह ने बोल दिया मैं अब से क्रिकेट नहीं खेलूंगा? क्या उसने सिस्टम को ब्लेम करना शुरू कर दिया? जो सिस्टम में चेंज आना होगा देखिए वो तो आएगा ही अपने आप. They will try to bring the balance between bat and ball. But as a bowler, what is my duty? That I try to find a way in which I can find the best possible solution for my problems, in which I can survive in that difficult environment, because situations have changed. And that is what a true winner is able to do. If you sulk, then there is nothing much which can be done about it. Okay. Anyway, now making notes for polity. A few things. I always suggest to students that maintain only one notebook. जो आपकी क्लास के नोट्स की नोटबुक है उसी को सोर्स बनाइए, उसी के अंदर अपना कंटेंट एडिशन करते जाइए. न्यूज़पेपर आर्टिकल से थोड़ा बहुत कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट स्टैटिस्टिक आया, ऑब्जर्वेशन आया. सेकेंडली व्हाट यू कैन डू इज, फॉर ऑल द सब्जेक्ट्स पुट टुगेदर यू कैन मेंटेन वन सेपरेट नोटबुक जिसमें आप हर सब्जेक्ट से रिलेटेड कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट स्टैटिस्टिक्स, इंपॉर्टेंट स्कीम्स, इंपॉर्टेंट इनिशिएटिव्स ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट लिखेंगे. एंड यू विल नॉट हैव अ लॉट ऑफ कंटेंट इन दैट. मतलब अगर पॉलिटी है तो पॉलिटी के लिए 30-40 डेटा पॉइंट हो सकते हैं मैक्सिमम. Some important judgments of the court, some important schemes and programs of the government, some important articles, some important statistics I will write related to polity governance, some important statistics related to society, geography. एक ही notebook में separate sections बना के. And whenever I am doing answer writing practice, I will open up that notebook before and I will see what are the numbers, statistics that are there, and I'll try to write them and use them in my answers. I will have to practice doing that also. And another thing that I should do is, again, calendar में schedule set कीजिए, हर 3 दिन में 5 दिन में मैं इस नोटबुक को देखूंगा पूरी तरीके से, या उसका एक पोर्शन देखूंगा. सो आई विल डू कॉन्स्टेंट रिविजन एज वेल, सो दैट आई ऑलवेज गिव दिस वन एग्जाम्पल दैट हम सबको याद है दैट इन इंडिया एग्रीकल्चर इज एम्प्लॉइंग ऑलमोस्ट 50 to 60% ऑफ इंडियाज वर्कफोर्स. ये स्टैटिस्टिक मुझे याद करने की जरूरत नहीं है, इतनी बार रिपीट किया कि मेरे को याद हो गया है. सेम वे, इफ आई रिपीट सम ऑफ दी स्टैटिस्टिक्स मल्टीपल नंबर ऑफ टाइम्स, they will become second nature to me and I'll be able to easily use them in the examination. And please remember, एक ही statistic को आप multiple papers में अलग अलग जगह use कर सकते हैं. And that's what the candidates are doing, those who are successful in the examination. So that's another thing that I need to do. And then also the last thing, don't feel FOMO कि अरे मेरा ये मिस हो गया, वो इन्फॉर्मेशन मिस हो गया, मेरे पास तो ये नोट्स में इतना नहीं था, मैंने फ्रेंड के नोट्स देख लिए उसमें बहुत ज़्यादा कुछ था. इट्स ओके. बहुत सारा कंटेंट लिखने के मार्क्स नहीं मिल रहे हैं. रेलेवेंट कंटेंट अच्छे से स्ट्रक्चर तरीके से लिखने के मार्क्स मिल रहे हैं. तो मुझे वो सीखना है अपनी प्रिपरेशन के अंदर. नाउ व्हाट एल्स, सो दिस इज व्हाट आई नीड टू डू, that I need to, so these are the the excerpts that I've got from some of the toppers of the past, topper copies. So constitutional provisions, court judgments, numbers, statistics, diagrams, ये सब पॉलिटी के रिलेटेड एक जगह पे होने चाहिए. कुछ बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं होना चाहिए एक्सटेंसिव, इतना नहीं कि मतलब फिर मैं उसको रिकलेक्ट ही नहीं कर पाऊँ, and I can't use that. But when you start writing it somewhere and then you keep using it in your answers, जब आप घर पे pre-IQs लिख रहे हैं, टेस्ट लिख रहे हैं, तो टेस्ट से पहले ये थोड़ा पढ़ के जाइएगा. घर पे क्वेश्चन अटेम्प्ट कर रहे हैं तो पढ़ लीजिएगा उसको. सो दैट्स हाउ यू नीड टू बी डूइंग दिस एंटायर एक्सरसाइज. डायग्राम्स प्रैक्टिस कर लिए. मेंटेन अ सेपरेट सेक्शन इन द नोट्स फॉर वैल्यू एडिशन बेसिकली. ओके. एंड देन another important thing, how do I evaluate my answer? This is one question that a lot of students come and ask me. See, one is that, again, if you are my student here, if you come with a PYQ answer written, I will never tell you कि नहीं जाओ यहाँ से. Either I will tell you that, see, right now I don't have the time, please come later. But I will definitely give you time and I will provide you feedback on some answers. If you are getting to me with 100 answers, मैं 10 पे तो दे ही दूंगा आपको feedback. तो जैसे आपको एक direction मिल जाएगा. So that is one. जहाँ तक बात आती है, और मैं अपनी जो daily answer writing practice कर रहा हूँ, how do I get evaluation of that? Of course, see, I mean test series etc. is one of the ways, and you should definitely join a test series because it will give you simulation of what it feels to be in the examination hall and writing the paper in 3 hours time. But at the same time, मैं टेस्ट सीरीज की इवैल्यूएशन को बहुत ज़्यादा सीरियसली ना लूँ. ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट बात है. प्लीज रिमेंबर दैट टेस्ट सीरीज इवैल्यूएशन इज नॉट बीइंग डन बाय एक्सपर्ट्स लाइक द वे इट इज बीइंग डन इन यूपीएससी. इट इज नॉट बीइंग डन बाय फैकल्टी मेंबर्स ऑल्सो. मोस्ट प्रोबेबली इट विल बी सम पर्सन who may have qualified the prelims or may have given an interview earlier in any of the coaching institute who would be doing this. So their evaluation is not always going to be perfect, but उससे आपको एक थोड़ा सा डायरेक्शन ठीक मिल जाएगा. But do not over rely on that judgment that they have given. Use your own mind as well. The best way to evaluate your answers is pick up previous year topper copies. कोई टॉपिक कवर कीजिए, देखिए उन्होंने किस क्वेश्चन के आंसर लिखे हैं. बिफोर लुकिंग एट द क्वेश्चन आंसर, पहले से ही कहीं पे क्वेश्चन लिख के रख लीजिएगा. टॉपर कॉपी डाउनलोड करी, उसके क्वेश्चंस कहीं अलग से सेपरेट लिख लिए, एंड देन डेली बेसिस पे मैं वही क्वेश्चन के आंसर्स लिखूंगा विच टॉपर हैज अटेम्प्टेड, एंड देन आई विल ट्राई टू कंपेयर माय आंसर टू देयर आंसर, एंड दैट विल बी द बेस्ट वे फॉर मी टू इवैल्यूएट वेयर माय आंसर स्टैंड्स. इट डज नॉट मीन दैट द आंसर रिटन बाय द टॉपर वुड ऑलवेज बी द बेस्ट आंसर, बट इट विल गिव मी सम डायरेक्शन ऑफ वेदर आई एम गोइंग इन द राइट और द रॉन्ग डायरेक्शन. थोड़ा बहुत तो मुझे एक गाइडेंस मिल जाएगा. दैट्स द बेस्ट वे ऑफ सेल्फ इवैल्यूएशन. सेकंड इज दैट use the network of your peers, your friends. Have a group of 2-3 friends, those who are like-minded, where you can share your answers with each other. Do not think that मैंने अपना आंसर किसी को दे दिया तो वो मेरा कंटेंट चुरा लेगा. सब ऐसा कोई सेपरेट कंटेंट है नहीं, है ना. सो डोंट बी इनसिक्योर. ओके. सो when you will learn from the other person, हाँ copyright, है ना. So you will learn from the other person will also learn from you. This is a give and take. That way both of you will do well, or 3 of you will do well. But हाँ, आपने जो है जमात बुला ली है एक 10 लोगों की and there is a महफिल that is set every day that is evaluating everyone's answers, and there are people those who are not serious also about the exam. If you're doing this, so then it's doomsday for you. What can I tell you? You people are smart enough to realize that what kind of people whom you should be keeping in your company when you're preparing for this examination. That is very important. I can tell you this, I have seen many candidates in the past preparing in groups of 2 and 3 and doing really well. सबका सिलेक्शन हो जाता है ग्रुप के अंदर, क्योंकि साथ में प्रिपरेशन कर रहे होते हैं, साथ में एक दूसरे को हेल्प कर रहे होते हैं. एक अकाउंटेबिलिटी बडी भी बन जाता है आपका, that you can tell the other person that you will hold me accountable whether I studied 6 hours a day or not. I will hold you accountable for the same. And that way थोड़ा सा आपको एक fear रहता है. Plus when you have someone of your age, someone who's in the same boat as your, who's holding you accountable, it's easier because they understand what you are going through. You can always do that with your parents or with your relatives or with your teacher or mentor and all of that as well. But best मुझे लगता है कि आप अपने ही फ्रेंड सर्कल के अंदर यहाँ पे 1-2 लोग ढूंढिए, and that's the advantage I always tell those who are preparing offline for this exam, जो यहाँ पे आके prepare कर रहे हैं. Of course, preparing in Rajendra Nagar or Mukherjee Nagar or in Delhi may have its own downsides, and which is very obvious. But the advantage is what you also need to exploit if you are here. अगर आप हैं यहाँ पे तो आप प्लीज उसको यूज कीजिए, एक दूसरे की कंपनी को यूज कीजिए टू अंडरस्टैंड हाउ द अदर पर्सन इज थिंकिंग, टू understand what is the approach that they are taking, how they look at answer writing, how they look at questions, how they prepare. You will learn a lot. Maximum learning, it has been proven across studies across the world, is it comes through peer learning and not through classroom learning. Classroom learning में आप कम समझते हैं because आप मुझसे इतना relate नहीं कर सकते. Plus my knowledge level is here, yours is here. However hard I may try, I will still, अगर ये इतना डिफरेंस है तो मैं यहाँ आ सकता हूँ, मे बी यहाँ आ सकता हूँ, बट मैं बिल्कुल आपके लेवल पे तो नहीं आ पाऊंगा कभी भी. सो देयर विल ऑलवेज बी अ स्लाइट डिस्कनेक्ट, एंड देयरफॉर द बेस्ट पर्सन टू हेल्प यू प्रिपेयर is somebody, some friend who can help you do that, and journey becomes easier as well. Okay, so use that also, and that's why जैसे मैंने यहाँ पे एक एग्जाम्पल दिया है कि एक क्वेश्चन है which was asked in test series, मैंने अलग से लिख लिया, पहले मैंने इसका आंसर लिखा और उसके बाद प्रीवियस ईयर टॉपर को थी, मैं अपने आंसर को उसके बेसिस पे वैल्यूएट करूंगा. आई मे हैव रिटन बेटर आंसर देन द टॉपर, दैट इज ओके, बट आई नीड टू हैव समथिंग, सम basic standard I can use in order to judge where my answer writing is going. Okay, so do that kind of an exercise as well. What are some of the common mistakes that I need to avoid as far as this exam, as far as this subject is concerned? First and foremost, write tests. Reading lot of books is not going to get you marks in the exam. This is an old data, but something that I always used to tell the students, look at the number of tests that were written on an average by the candidates, those who were securing top 30 ranks in CSE 2022. ये हमारे टेस्ट कितने टॉपर्स ने कितने कितने लिखे थे, आप देखिए 10, 12, 15 इतने टेस्ट लिख रहे हैं टॉपर्स. अगर कोई आपको ये बोले कि मेरा तो बिना टेस्ट के हो गया, देखिए हो सकता है किसी के साथ ऐसा. Why? Because they may have done a lot of other practice or they may have some background. आपको उनकी स्टोरी नहीं पता है. If I have written 10 research papers when I was in college, मेरी राइटिंग स्किल्स तो ऑलरेडी बहुत अच्छी हैं, तो मुझे शायद उतना आंसर राइटिंग करने की जरूरत नहीं है, बिकॉज माई एक्सप्रेशन स्किल्स आर वेरी गुड. इफ आई एम अ लॉ स्टूडेंट, देन आई हैव स्टडीड 5 years लॉ एट NLU, मैं मूट कोर्ट्स में पार्टिसिपेट किया हूँ, मैंने रिसर्च पेपर सबमिट किए हैं, सो आई ऑलरेडी हैव ग्रास्प ऑफ हाउ टू एक्सप्रेस माई सेल्फ इन लिमिटेड अमाउंट ऑफ टाइम इन लिमिटेड नंबर ऑफ वर्ड्स. आई हैव डेवलप्ड दैट स्किल ओवर 5 years. बट वॉट इफ यू आर इंजीनियर, then it's a problem because you have never really practiced writing answers, so you cannot expect कि आप जो है उनके comparison कर सकते हैं. तो ये कई बार बड़ा important है that whatever the other topper is saying, please listen to it with a pinch of salt. And also please remember, in the age and day of social media, in the age of shorts, हम क्या करते हैं, 15 सेकंड का शॉट उठा के डाल देते हैं. तो टॉपर का एक शॉट आएगा कि I never wrote any test and I got rank 50 or whatever. You did not listen to the entire interview. You did not know the entire journey. आपने बस 15 सेकंड में जज कर लिया कि साहब इसकी तो मेरे को पूरी जीवन कहानी पता है. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता. That person has gone through something else in his life which you may not have gone through, and therefore they have better grasp on certain things. It's as simple as if you're an engineer, then you already have some comfort with science and technology. You have some comfort already with subjects like cyber security. You already have some comfort with CSAT questions. So you can never be in the same boat as someone who's coming from humanities background, जिसने कभी 10th क्लास के बाद प्रॉपरली एक मैथमेटिक्स का क्वेश्चन सॉल्व नहीं किया है. तो अब मैं अपना एग्जांपल देता हूँ. आई ऑलवेज गिव दिस एग्जांपल दैट व्हेन आई वाज गिविंग द अटेम्प्ट्स, 15 तक तो CSAT के मार्क्स कैलकुलेट होते थे. 16, 17 इज व्हेन दे ओनली GS मार्क्स वर बीइंग इवैल्यूएटेड फॉर सिलेक्शन इन द मेंस एग्जामिनेशन. 15 तक मुझे कभी भी एक भी दिक्कत नहीं हुई. 16, 17 1 year I passed the prelims examination on a very thin margin, literally 4-5 marks के साथ हुआ था. 17 I was able to cover up significantly, but 15 I remember specifically my performance in prelims in GS was not good, but I was able to make up for it in CSAT. Lot of times people came and asked me कि तुम्हें CSAT में इतने के नंबर कैसे आ गए? How are you able to get 170 in CSAT, 150 in CSAT? The reason for that is because I had prepared for IIT JEE, I had prepared for engineering entrance examination, I had studied mathematics at some level in 4 years in college. After that I prepared for CAT, I prepared for GMAT. तो मेरे को already aptitude था उन questions को solve करने का, तो मुझे special तैयारी नहीं लगी. पर अब अगर मैं जाके किसी को बोल लूँ एक इंटरव्यू में 10 सेकंड के कि साहब मेरे 150 नंबर आए थे, मैंने तो कभी CSAT की तैयारी नहीं करी, this is a limited information. This is actually in many ways misinformation as well, because it is not complete information. So therefore, please do not go by these conceptions that you should not be writing tests. Write tests. test yourself in difficult papers, in difficult circumstances, in the examination hall, and see how you are doing in the papers. Then this is another important thing, treating Lakshmikant as the ceiling and the floor as well, कि बस लक्ष्मीकांत पढ़ लिया सब हो जाएगा, नहीं होगा, क्योंकि आप देखिए क्वेश्चंस एक बार जाके प्रीलिम्स के, मेंस के, यू विल रियलाइज दैट केवल लक्ष्मीकांत के कंटेंट के बेसिस पे ऊपर आप नहीं कर पाएंगे. You will have to use current affairs, you will have to read newspapers, and you will have to know how to express what you have read in Lakshmikant and current affairs in that limited amount of time. So simply because मैंने लक्ष्मीकांत पढ़ ली, ये तो फ्लोर है, इतना तो बेसिक सबको करना है, 4 बार लक्ष्मीकांत रिवाइज करनी है तो करना ही करना है, पर उसके ऊपर जाना है आगे, and that's what you need to remember. The other thing is that do not try to rote learn things. अभी आर्टिकल 123 213 हमने समझा, क्या मैंने आपको कोई भी चीज रटाने की कोशिश करी? We tried to understand it in a very coherent manner. Why ordinance making powers were given in the constitution, how they have been given, what are the checks and balances, how the court has given judgment, what happened, why the court gave such a judgment. When you understand this as a story, you will remember it forever, 101%. But that basically requires you to be a bit patient and study the concepts in a very comprehensive manner. Now, and that's where the importance of a teacher in classroom teaching comes. Because किताब में कई बार उस तरीके से explain नहीं होता है. I can do it by myself also with the use of AI, with the use of books, etc. But it will take time. The same concept of ordinance, which you will take probably 1 day to read and understand in thoroughness, I will cover that concept in 2 hours in the class. That does not mean that बस हो गया काम. वो तो मैंने आपके लिए कॉन्सेप्ट आसान करके एक स्टोरी मैनर में सब कुछ एक्सप्लेन कर दिया, बट उसके बाद then I have to go and practice, revise as well. That is where my real hard work is going to come in. Right? So do not try to rote learn anything, not just with respect to this subject, but with respect to other subjects as well. Except जैसे environment में national park कौन सा कहाँ पे है, कौन सी river कौन से national park में flow करती है, कौन सा endangered species है. अब some of this information of course you will have to memorize. There is no other way around it. But इतना ऐसा बहुत ज़्यादा information नहीं है वो. Memory is not the most important thing. Conceptual understanding is the most important thing if you have to do well in this examination. This is something that I have already told you. Always refer PYQs before you start reading a topic, and once you're done with reading the topic and cover that topic, then also go back to the PYQ to judge where you stand with respect to that particular topic. Practice answer writing with the help of newspaper articles. Newspaper में article आया delimitation के ऊपर, Indian Express का explained article है. मैंने newspaper का article पढ़ा और उसी के बेसिस पे खुद क्वेश्चन बनाया. What is delimitation? What are the challenges that may emerge because of the recent moves made by the central government with respect to delimitation? Why are the southern states objecting to the way the delimitation has been proposed by the government? अब ये 3 चीजें मैंने आर्टिकल में पढ़ी. I write down my own question and try to write down my answer. Now see, this way that problem which I was discussing कि भाई notes बनाओ और ये सब वो solve हो जाएगा. Why? Because these answers that I will write will act as my notes, plus they will also give me answer writing practice, and I will have something which will be readily available for me to refer later. तो पहले मुझे क्या करना है, न्यूज़पेपर आर्टिकल पढ़ना है एक बार, then maybe आधा घंटा 1 घंटा 2 घंटे बाद फिर again न्यूज़पेपर आर्टिकल पढ़ा, then after that frame 2 or 3 questions on basis of that, and then try to write the answers to those questions. Best exercise to revise, to make notes, and to also develop your answer writing skills. Start on this from the beginning itself. Don't wait for the syllabus to be completed. Start on it from the beginning itself, especially Indian Express explained, Hindu explained article से begin कीजिएगा. Bamboo plant. Okay, so now bamboo is a very interesting plant because within the first few weeks, the growth of the bamboo plant is just a few feet. But then the real growth of the bamboo plant happens several years later. What I am trying to say is consistent efforts made over a long period of time have the power of what is called as compounding. So do not expect quick results in this examination process. It is a time taking process. It requires a bit of patience. You cannot expect कि मतलब 6 महीने में तैयारी हो जाएगी. कुछ लोग कर भी लेते हैं. I have seen many students do that as well. But हाथ की 5 उंगलियां बराबर नहीं होती. All the 5 fingers in the hands are not of same length. Everyone has a different story, different background, what you have done, what has been your upbringing, so many things. Many of you may be first generation learners. Your father is a farmer. you have never ever been told कि सिविल सर्विस का सिलेबस क्या होता है, घर में कोई गाइड करने वाला नहीं है, तो आपको थोड़ा टाइम ज़्यादा लगेगा. अब अनफॉर्चुनेटली यू आर नॉट कमिंग फ्रॉम एज प्रिविलेज बैकग्राउंड एज कम्पेयर टू समवन हुज फादर इज एन IAS ऑफिसर. वो ऑलरेडी एग्जाम क्रैक कर चुके, तो उनको पता है कि बेसिक अप्रोच क्या रखनी है. देयर इज सम एल्डर ब्रदर और सिस्टर इन द हाउस हु इज देयर टू गाइड देम. सो दैट मेक्स अ डिफरेंस. बट ऐसा नहीं है कि मतलब फर्स्ट जनरेशन लर्नर्स नहीं कर सकते, बट पेशेंस थोड़ी ज़्यादा दिखानी पड़ेगी मुझे, because my growth story is slightly different from the others. And that brings me to the last point. Okay, so there is this book which I always recommend to the students that you should read at some point of time, which is called as The Atomic Habits by James Clear. In this book, James Clear talks about a very interesting concept. He talks about the power of compounding. So you see, this is one of the image of the British cycling team. Now, British cycling team all through the 20th century was extremely poor. कहीं पे कुछ नहीं जीतते थे. 100 साल के ओलंपिक्स के अंदर बेयरली शायद एक मेडल जीता होगा. इनफैक्ट सो मच सो दैट द फ्रेंच आर द वंस दोज हु मेक द बेस्ट बाइसिकल्स इन द वर्ल्ड. दे स्टॉप्ड प्रोवाइडिंग दीज बाइसिकल्स टू द इंग्लिश टीम बिकॉज दे सेड कि तुम हमारी बाइसिकल यूज करोगे, लास्ट आओगे, फसड्डी दिखोगे और हमारी ब्रांड जो इफेक्ट होगी, तो वी विल नॉट सेल यू आवर बाइसिकल्स. दिस इज वॉट द इंग्लिश टीम हैड टू गो थ्रू. दे वर नॉट एबल टू फिगर आउट व्हाट इज दैट इज गोइंग रॉन्ग हियर. Then they hire a performance director in the early 2000s. His name was, I think, David Balford. So David Balford comes. He says that if we have to improve as a team, we have to find marginal small improvements in smallest of the things that we are doing. So he started from something like that. If recovery has to happen for the athletes, what is the gel that they should apply, which helps in best recovery? तो वी विल डू सम एनालिसिस एंड रिसर्च ऑन दैट कि कौन सा जेल हमें लगाना चाहिए. सेकेंड, आई विल गो इनटू दैट व्हाट आर द बेड्स दैट द एथलीट्स आर स्लीपिंग ऑन. लेट्स सी इज दैट हैविंग सम इफेक्ट ऑन देयर परफॉर्मेंस. थर्ड, आई विल सी व्हाट इज द फूड दैट दे ईट. If I increase the amount of protein intake, if I increase the amount of carbohydrate intake, what is the outcome that will be there? Of course, this will be a hit and trial, but I hope you are understanding what I am saying here. Small improvements in my daily routine. मैं कौन सा तकिया यूज कर रहा हूँ, मैं कितने सुबह बजे उठ रहा हूँ, what is the gel that I am applying to recover, whether I am taking an ice bath after I have done an intense session of training, whether the height of the cycle seat needs to be adjusted, what is the optimum level. He tried to break the entire problem into small parts and tried to make improvement in every small thing by 0.1%. 0.1%. And James Clear says that this 1% improvement that is happening over a period of time would lead to 37 times better results in the future. Whereas if I go 1% worse every day, आज मैंने 5 क्वेश्चन किए, कल मैंने कुछ नहीं किया, फिर परसों मैंने कुछ नहीं किया, my ability will start going down. आज मैंने 5 किए, कल मैंने फिर 5 किए, फिर मैंने 5 किए, फिर 5 किए, suddenly you will see the power of compounding, suddenly. And that is what is required in preparation for this examination, power of compounding. I need to make small incremental improvements on a daily basis. I need to be a bit patient. I need to find what are the small things that I need to focus on. And then you will see that your performance will improve drastically. And then what happened? The British team in 2008 Beijing Olympics was able to win, if I'm not wrong, almost 60% of the medals in cycling. 2012 London Olympics, they broke several records. Then Tour de France hota hai, which is one of the biggest cycling competitions in the world. They did extremely well in that. Power of compounding, small things. If I read 2 pages of a book every day, in 2 months at least I'll be able to finish the book. If I don't read anything, at the end of 2 months I will have nothing. But 2 pages a day, I'll be able to read the entire book. So consistency is what really matters. Consistency is something which is compoundable. It works in everything in life, everything. So therefore, make those small increments, small adjustments to your routine, or whether it is with respect to the books that you are referring, or it is with respect to the questions that you are solving, or it is with respect to the content that you are revising. Small increments every day, and you will see a drastic improvement in your performance. And that's what this exam is all about. Not just about polity, but about every other subject as well. Okay. So this is all that is there from my end. Of course, some of this may have sounded repetitive for many of you, but the idea was that you get some broad idea of how to approach the subject of polity, right? And again, some of you, those who are students in the class, you would have understood that this is the kind of methodology that we adopt in covering the concepts in the class as well, in a story, in a logical manner, so that you have good grasp over the concepts and you also understand how to solve prelims and mains both questions, and you have good conceptual clarity, right? Any questions that you have, and we can then call up the session. Anyone has any doubts, any questions? Also, this is my email ID, Jatin CSC, Jatin Gupta CSC actually. So I used to have one Telegram channel. I don't know what happened. किसी ने copyright मार दिया मेरे ही Telegram channel पे. आप सोचिए, एक Telegram channel मेरा चल रहा था, उस पे मैं बहुत ही कम पोस्ट करता था. कभी कभी अब recently मैंने क्या किया था, that I started posting some questions and some documents on that. अब क्योंकि इतने सारे जतिन गुप्ता के नाम से टेलीग्राम चैनल फर्जी चल रहे थे, तो पता नहीं क्या हुआ, आई डोंट नो व्हाट हैज हैपेंड. या तो जो मैंने डॉक्यूमेंट अपलोड किया, किसी ने उठा के अपने टेलीग्राम चैनल पे अपना कॉपीराइट बना के डाल दिया उसको, और ओरिजिनल क्रिएटर को ही ऊपर ही कॉपीराइट इन्फ्रिंजमेंट का केस बना दिया, और मेरा वो टेलीग्राम चैनल मेरे को पता भी नहीं चला. मेरे को तो बाद में जब मेरे को इतनी सारी मेल्स आई स्टूडेंट की, देन आई लॉग्ड इन फ्रॉम वन ऑफ माई फ्रेंड्स अकाउंट इन टेलीग्राम, मैंने बोला अरे ये क्या हो गया, आई कांट एक्सेस माई टेलीग्राम अकाउंट. सो and again I have not been able to find time to resolve this. अगर आप में से कोई help कर सकता हो तो मुझे please help कर दीजिएगा to recover my telegram channel. But anyway, not that it really matters much, but this is my email ID. You can write email to me. Some of you have been writing a lot of emails to me in the recent days. I have responded to some mails. I have not been able to respond to some mails. Just that there is a time crunch and there is so much that is to be responded to, but I'll try my best that if I can respond to your queries. If you want to come and meet me at some time, you can always come here kabhi jab class ke baad or something. If we have time, then we can definitely meet between the break as well. Any questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Your preparation may look complete, but UPSC Prelims 2026 showed something important. Completion is not the same as readiness. The paper did not just test whether aspirant had read a topic, it tested whether they could think through it. Could they eliminate smartly? Could they connect static concepts with current issues? Could they stay calm when the question was not direct? Could they take decisions under pressure? That is where many aspirants struggle, not because they did not study, but because their preparation stayed in input mode, reading more, collecting more, revising passively. UPSC needs more than that. It needs a preparation system that turns knowledge into judgment. That is what the VisionIAS Delhi GS Foundation course is built for. Concepts are taught in a connected sequence. Current affairs is linked with static subjects. Tests help you identify gaps before the exam does. Answer writing builds structured thinking for mains. Mentorship helps correct your direction early. Build readiness from the beginning. VisionIAS Delhi GS Foundation course.